I am Sarah, 32 years old, and for the last 5 years I have made a very comfortable living as a forensic accountant tracking down hidden assets for high-profile divorce cases. My husband Jason believes I am just a glorified bookkeeper who organizes tax receipts for small bakeries. He often jokes to his friends that numbers are the only thing I am good at because I lack imagination. He is about to learn that imagination is unnecessary when you have calculation. My husband said he was going to Toronto for a 3-year work assignment. I saw him off at the airport in tears, but the moment I got home, I transferred the entire $700,000 from our savings and promptly filed for divorce. Before I tell you exactly how I executed the perfect financial heist against the man who thought he played me, please like and subscribe if you believe that betrayal should always come with a price tag. The automatic doors of O'Hare International Airport hissed open, blasting us with the frigid Chicago air. It was fitting, really. The temperature outside matched the temperature inside my marriage, though Jason was doing a spectacular job of pretending otherwise. He adjusted his scarf, the cashmere one I had bought him last Christmas, and turned to me with a look of practiced sorrow. "You do not have to wait." "Sarah," he said, his voice dripping with that smooth sales manager charm that had worked on me 5 years ago. "The traffic back to the suburbs is going to be a nightmare. Go home. Get some rest. You look exhausted." I did look exhausted. I had spent the last 3 nights awake, not because I was heartbroken over his departure, but because I had been mirroring his hard drive while he slept. But I played my part. I reached out and smoothed the lapel of his coat, letting my hand linger there. I needed to check one last thing. "I will miss you so much, Jason," I said, forcing a wobble into my voice. 3 years is such a long time. Are you sure I cannot come visit you next month? I could work remotely." He flinched. It was subtle, a tiny tightening of his jaw, but I saw it. "No, sweetheart," he said quickly, grabbing my hands to stop me from touching him. "The company housing is strictly for employees. Plus, you know how intense these regional startups are. I will be working 16-hour days. I do not want you sitting alone in a cold apartment in Toronto while I grind away. This is for us. Remember, I make the sacrifice now so we can retire early. For us." That was his favorite phrase. He used it whenever he wanted to spend our money on something he wanted. That new set of golf clubs was for networking for us. The luxury lease on the Tesla was for his image for us. He checked his watch, a Rolex Submariner that cost more than my first car. I bought that for him too, technically, since my salary paid the mortgage while his commissions paid for his toys. "I better go," he said, glancing toward the TSA pre-check line. "Oh, and Sarah, one more thing." "Yes." I looked up at him with wide, watery eyes. "Do not worry about the investment accounts while I am gone. The market is volatile right now. If you see the numbers drop, do not panic and do not move anything. I have set up some automated trades. Just focus on your little tax clients and keep the house standing. I will handle the big picture." My little tax clients. The insult landed softly like a familiar slap. He had no idea that last month my little tax clients included a Fortune 500 company that hired me to audit their internal theft, resulting in the arrest of 3 executives. "I promise," I whispered. "I won't touch a thing without asking you." "Good girl," he said. He leaned in to kiss me. I held my breath, not from anticipation, but to analyze the data. As he pulled me into a hug, I buried my face in his chest. There it was. Beneath the layer of his usual cologne, there was a faint, sickly sweet undercurrent. Vanilla and synthetic musk. It was not a scent I owned. It was the kind of perfume a 23-year-old intern would wear because she thought it smelled expensive. It was the smell of Vanessa. I pulled away, wiping a fake tear from my cheek. "Call me when you land." "Of course," he said, flashing that winning smile. I watched him walk away. He joined the queue for security, looking every bit the successful executive on his way to conquer a new market. He did not look back once. As soon as he disappeared behind the frosted glass of the security checkpoint, my posture changed. The slump in my shoulders vanished. The tears stopped instantly. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I did not open my text messages. I opened the Find My app. The little dot representing his luggage was moving, but it was not moving toward the gate for the Air Canada flight to Toronto. It was moving toward the exit. I turned around and walked out of the terminal. I did not go to the pickup lane. I took the elevator to the short-term parking garage. I sat in the driver's seat of my sedan, the practical car we kept, because Jason insisted the Tesla was his work vehicle. I waited. 10 minutes later, I saw him. He walked out of a different exit on the lower-level phone pressed to his ear, laughing. He looked relieved. He looked like a man who had just escaped prison. He didn't get into a taxi. He got into an Uber Black that was waiting at the curb. I gave them a 2-car length lead, then I pulled out. Driving through Chicago traffic requires aggression, but today I drove with surgical precision. I kept my distance watching the black SUV weave through the lanes. My heart rate was steady at 65 beats per minute. This was not a heartbreak. This was an investigation. And I was closing the case. They did not head north toward the highway that would take them to O'Hare's private hangars. They headed south back toward the city. I knew exactly where they were going before they even took the exit. The lakeshore. It was one of the newest, most pretentious high-rises on the waterfront. Floor-to-ceiling glass concierge service and rent that started at $5,000 a month. I knew this because 3 months ago I noticed a recurring withdrawal from Jason's personal checking account labeled Consulting Services. I had traced the merchant ID to a shell company owned by the property management firm of the Lakeshore. He wasn't going to Toronto. He was moving 20 minutes away. I parked across the street, keeping the engine running. I watched Jason get out of the Uber. The trunk popped open and he hauled out his 2 large suitcases. Then the doors of the building opened. She came running out. Vanessa. She was wearing a cropped sweater and leggings, looking exactly like the fitness influencers Jason followed on Instagram. She launched herself at him, wrapping her legs around his waist. He dropped his bags and spun her around, laughing. They kissed right there on the sidewalk in broad daylight. I raised my phone and snapped 3 photos. High definition. Clear faces. The timestamp and geotag were automatically embedded. I did not feel the urge to run him over. I did not feel the urge to scream. What I felt was a cold, hard clarity. He had looked me in the eye in the house that I paid for and told me he was going to sacrifice for our future. He was right. He was about to sacrifice everything, and I was going to be the one holding the knife. I put the car in drive and headed home. The commute that usually frustrated me felt like a victory lap. When I pulled into the driveway of our 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs, the house felt different. It was no longer our home. It was an asset. And assets needed to be liquidated. I walked inside, kicking off my heels in the hallway. I went straight to Jason's home office. He called it his man cave. It was decorated with framed photos of himself at golf tournaments and awards from his sales job. He had locked the door, of course. He always locked it when he went away, claiming he had sensitive client files. He didn't know that I had made a copy of the key 6 months ago when he lost his, and I had to call the locksmith. I unlocked the door and sat at his desk. I woke up his computer. Password. It was his birthday. Predictable. I didn't need to snoop through his emails. I had done that weeks ago. I knew about the plans to wait until the divorce laws in Illinois worked in his favor. I knew about his plan to claim I was financially abusive because I controlled the budget. I knew he was waiting for his bonus to hit so he could stash it before filing. Today, I was going to beat him to the punch. I opened my laptop and placed it next to his. I logged into our main joint savings account. The balance stared back at me, $450.12. This money was the inheritance from my parents. When they died in a car accident 4 years ago, Jason had convinced me to put it into a joint account. It strengthens our portfolio for loan applications, he had said. Like a fool blinded by grief and trust, I had agreed. Legally, it was now marital property. In a divorce court, he would be entitled to half, unless the money wasn't there. I opened a second window. This was a login for a trust account I had established 3 days ago, utilizing a legal loophole that allowed for the protection of assets in the event of suspected fraud. As a forensic accountant, I knew the banking regulations better than the bankers did. I initiated a wire transfer. Amount $700,000. Recipient, the Sarah Miller Revocable Trust. Memo, repayment of family loan. I hovered my mouse over the submit button. My hand did not shake. I thought about the fake Chanel perfume. I thought about the rental at the lakeshore. I thought about the good girl comment at the airport. I clicked. A moment later, my phone rang. It was the bank's fraud prevention department. I put on my headset and cleared my throat, pitching my voice up an octave. I needed to sound flustered. I needed to sound like the wife Jason described to his friends. "Hello," I answered, sounding breathless. "Mrs. Reynolds, this is Mark from Chase Fraud Prevention. We see a very large wire transfer attempted from your joint savings. We just need to verify this is you." "Oh, thank goodness you called Mark," I exclaimed. "Yes, it is me. My husband Jason, he is handling this big investment thing for us. He just left for Toronto, and he told me I had to move the money immediately, or we would miss the window. I am so bad with this technical stuff. Did I do it right? I am terrified I messed it up. He will be so mad if I miss the deadline." I could practically hear Mark rolling his eyes on the other end of the line, a confused wife terrified of her husband's anger. It was a narrative men like Mark understood. "No, you did it correctly, Mrs. Reynolds." Mark said, his voice dropping into a soothing, patronizing tone. "I just need you to verify your security questions." I answered them perfectly. Mother's maiden name, name of first pet, street I grew up on. "Okay, everything looks good," Mark said. "I will approve the release. The funds should land in the target account within 2 hours." "Thank you so much, Mark. You are a lifesaver." I hung up. The smile dropped from my face instantly. On the screen, the balance of our joint savings account updated. Current balance $450.12. I sat back in Jason's leather executive chair. The leather creaked. I felt powerful. I had just stripped him of the war chest he planned to use to start his new life with Vanessa. He was sitting in a luxury apartment he couldn't afford, with a woman who only loved him for a lifestyle he could no longer maintain. But I wasn't done. I opened my email and composed a message to the most ruthless divorce attorney in Chicago. I attached the photos from the lakeshore. I attached the screenshot of the zeroed-out bank account. I attached the file containing his chat logs with Vanessa, where they discussed waiting to divorce me until I received my annual bonus. Subject file. Immediately. Body. He has abandoned the marital home. I have secured the assets. Serve him at this address, the Lakeshore Apartments Unit, 42B. Do it today. I hit send. Then I stood up and walked to the small wine fridge Jason kept in the corner of his office. He kept his expensive bottles in the cellar, but he kept a few cheap bottles of red blend in here for when he was working late and didn't want to waste the good stuff. I grabbed a bottle of the cheap red. I didn't bother with a glass. I unscrewed the cap and took a long swig. It tasted sharp and acidic, but to me it tasted like freedom. I checked the time. It was 2:00 p.m. Jason would be ordering lunch with Vanessa right about now, probably pulling out his credit card to pay for sushi. He didn't know yet that I had logged into the credit card portal 10 minutes ago and reported the card as lost. I took another sip of wine and looked around the room. "Good luck in Toronto." "Jason?" I whispered to the empty room. I walked out of his office and went to the master bedroom. I pulled my suitcase from the closet. Not to pack my clothes, but to pack his. I wasn't going to leave. This was my house. I paid the mortgage. I paid the property tax. I started pulling his suits from the rack. The expensive Italian wool suits he wore to impress clients. I threw them onto the floor. I grabbed his golf shirts. I grabbed his collection of limited edition sneakers. I didn't pack them neatly. I jammed them into garbage bags. My phone pinged. It was a notification from the bank. Transfer complete. Funds received. Then a second ping. A text from Jason. "Hey babe, just landed. Customs was crazy. Going to head to the company apartment now. Phone battery is dying, so I might not be able to talk until tomorrow. Love you." I looked at the text. Just landed. He was lying so effortlessly. He was probably 20 minutes away, sitting on a velvet couch, thinking he had pulled off the perfect crime. I typed a reply. I didn't send it, but I typed it out just to see how it looked. "Your card is going to be declined at dinner. And by the way, I prefer the blue tie on you, not the red one you are wearing right now." I deleted it. No, that was too easy. He needed to find out the hard way. I went downstairs to the kitchen. I needed to prepare for the evening. Brenda, my mother-in-law, had texted me earlier saying she and Chloe wanted to come over to check on me and make sure I wasn't too lonely. I knew what that meant. They wanted to come over and inspect the house to make sure I wasn't damaging their precious Jason's property. They wanted to gloat. They wanted to remind me of my place. I opened the fridge. It was fully stocked. I looked at the bottle of champagne Jason had been saving for his promotion. I popped the cork. Tonight was going to be a performance, and I was going to give the performance of a lifetime. When the doorbell rang at 6 o'clock p.m. sharp, I was ready. I had changed into my oversized sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. I had rubbed off my makeup to look pale and washed out. I had even cut up an onion and held it near my eyes to make them red and puffy. I opened the door. Brenda stood there holding a casserole dish covered in foil. Chloe was right behind her, scrolling on her phone, looking bored. "Oh, Sarah," Brenda said, her voice thick with fake sympathy. "Look at you. You look terrible." "Thank you for coming." "Brenda," I sniffled, stepping aside to let them in. I miss him so much already." Brenda marched into the kitchen and set the casserole down on my granite island. "Well, you need to pull yourself together. Jason is out there building a future for this family. The least you can do is keep the home fires burning without falling apart." Chloe looked up from her phone. "Did he land okay?" "He hasn't posted anything yet." "He texted me," I said, grabbing a tissue. "He is so tired. He went straight to sleep." Brenda opened my refrigerator and frowned. "Why is there so much expensive cheese in here, Sarah?" "You know. Jason hates it when you waste money on fancy food when he isn't here to eat it. You need to be budgeting better now that he is supporting 2 households." Supporting 2 households. The irony was so rich I almost choked. "Actually, Brenda," I said, keeping my head down, "I have been thinking about the budget. I decided to make some big changes today." "Good," Brenda said, pulling out a chair and sitting down like she owned the place. "Start by cutting the cable. You don't need all those channels just for yourself." "I didn't cut the cable," I said softly. "Then what did you do?" Brenda asked, snapping a piece of celery from a tray I had left out. I walked over to the counter where I had left my iPad. I tapped the screen to wake it up. It was displaying the live feed from the security camera I had installed at the front door of the Lakeshore apartment complex an hour ago. I hadn't just transferred money. I had hired a private investigator who was live streaming the entrance. I looked at Brenda. I decided to cut the dead weight. At that exact moment on the iPad screen, Jason walked out of the building. He wasn't alone. He was holding hands with Vanessa. And they weren't just walking. They were arguing with a valet driver who was refusing to give them their car keys. Brenda squinted at the screen. Is that Jason?" I smiled. The first real smile of the evening. "Yes, Brenda, that is Jason. And he seems to be having a problem with his credit card. Shall we watch?" The doorbell rang at 6 o'clock sharp. I did not need to check the security camera to know who it was. The aggressive, rhythmic pounding was a signature move of the 2 women who had spent the last 5 years trying to micromanage my marriage. I took a deep breath, adjusted the oversized stained t-shirt I had specifically chosen for this performance, and walked to the door. I had even rubbed my eyes to make them look red and puffy. To them, I needed to look like a woman on the verge of a breakdown, not a forensic accountant who had just executed a $700,000 asset transfer. I opened the door and forced a weak, trembling smile. Brenda, my mother-in-law, stood there holding a foil-covered casserole dish like it was a weapon. Beside her was Chloe, my sister-in-law, who was already looking past me into the foyer, probably checking for dust. "Oh, Sarah," Brenda sighed, her eyes scanning me from head to toe with undisguised disapproval. "Look at you. Jason has been gone for less than 12 hours, and you are already falling apart." "Thank you for coming," I whispered, stepping aside. "I just miss him so much. The house feels so empty." Brenda marched past me, her heels clicking loudly on the hardwood floors. She headed straight for the kitchen, treating my home with the familiarity of someone who believed she owned it. Chloe followed, offering me a tight, pitying grimace. "We brought dinner," Chloe said, though she didn't look like she had carried anything. "Mom made her tuna casserole. She said you probably wouldn't have the energy to cook. That was code for she thinks you are lazy." I followed them into the kitchen. Brenda set the dish down on my granite island with a heavy thud and immediately turned to the refrigerator. I stood by the sink, clasping my hands together to stop them from balling into fists. I watched as Brenda pulled open the double doors of the Sub-Zero fridge. She stood there for a long moment, inspecting the contents with the scrutiny of a health inspector. "Jesus," Sarah Brenda muttered, pulling out a block of aged cheddar and a jar of organic olives. "Look at all this waste. Jason is out there working his fingers to the bone in a new city, trying to build a future for this family, and you are stocking the fridge like you are hosting a gala. Do you have any idea how much this cheese costs?" I looked down at the floor. "It is just for snacking, Brenda." "Snacking," she scoffed, shoving the cheese back onto the shelf aggressively. "This is exactly what I have been telling Jason. You have no concept of the value of $1 because you have never had to earn one. A supportive wife cuts corners when her husband is making sacrifices. She does not buy imported olives while he is eating takeout in a hotel room." The irony was so thick I could taste it. Jason was currently eating at a 5-star steakhouse with his mistress using cash because I had cut his cards while I was being lectured about cheese I had paid for with my own salary. But I bit my tongue. "I am sorry," I said softly. "I will try to be more careful." "You better," Brenda said, closing the fridge door. "Now where is the wine? I need a glass after driving all the way out here." I pointed to the wine rack. While Brenda busied herself with the corkscrew, Chloe wandered out of the kitchen. I knew exactly where she was going. She was heading toward the mudroom closet where I kept my handbags. I kept my phone in my pocket, but I reached in and tapped the screen once. The voice memo app had been recording since I opened the front door. Mom Chloe's voice rang out from the hallway. "You have to see this." Brenda took a sip of wine and motioned for me to follow her. We walked into the hallway to find Chloe holding my Himalayan Birkin bag. It was a rare exclusive piece I had bought for myself as a reward after closing a massive fraud case last year. Jason thought it was a fake I bought online. Chloe, however, had an eye for labels. She was stroking the leather, her eyes wide with greed. "Sarah, why is this just sitting on the top shelf?" Chloe asked, turning to me. I do not use it very often," I stammered. "It is for special occasions." "Well, it is a crime to leave it gathering dust," Chloe said, slinging it over her shoulder and posing in front of the mirror. "It looks ridiculous sitting in a dark closet. You know I have that charity gala next week for the yoga studio. This would match my dress perfectly." She looked at Brenda, then back at me. "I am just going to borrow it." "Okay," Chloe said. "It is not really a question." It was a statement. "You are not going anywhere anyway. You are just going to be moping around the house waiting for Jason to call. You do not need a bag like this to go to the grocery store." I felt a surge of cold rage in my chest. That bag was worth more than Chloe's car. But if I said no, they would call Jason. They would complain that I was being selfish. And right now, I needed Jason to think I was the submissive, compliant wife he left behind. "Sure, Chloe," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "You can borrow it. Just please be careful." "Of course I will," Chloe scoffed. "I know how to take care of nice things, unlike some people." She kept the bag on her shoulder as we walked back to the dining room table. We sat down to eat the tuna casserole. It was dry and underseasoned, much like Brenda's personality. So Brenda began picking at her food. "Have you heard from him?" "He texted me when he landed." I lied. "He said he was going straight to the company apartment to sleep." Brenda nodded approvingly. "Good. He needs his rest. Toronto is a big market. If he succeeds there, he will be regional vice president within a year." She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "You know, Sarah, this separation might be a good thing for you two." "What do you mean?" I asked, genuinely curious to hear how she would spin this. "Well," Brenda took a long sip of wine. "Let us be honest. You and Jason, you are different. He is a shark. He is ambitious. He is going places. And you, well, you are very domestic. You like your little routines. You like staying home." She leaned forward, lowering her voice as if she were giving me advice. "Sometimes a man like Jason outgrows his environment. In Toronto, he is going to be surrounded by powerful people, executives, sophisticated women who understand the corporate world, women who can help him climb the ladder, not just anchor him down." I tightened my grip on my fork. Are you saying I am holding him back? I am just saying that he is going to be exposed to a new caliber of life, Brenda said smoothly, and he deserves someone who can keep up. I have always said Jason needs a power couple dynamic, like Marcus and Chloe. Chloe smirked, petting the Birkin bag on the chair next to her. Yeah, Marcus and I are building an empire. Jason has always had to carry the financial weight alone. It is stressful for him, Sarah. He tells us all the time how much pressure he feels being the sole provider. The sole provider. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to pull out my phone and show them the bank statements. I wanted to show them that their precious Jason had not paid a single mortgage payment in 3 years. I wanted to show them that the very chair Brenda was sitting on was paid for by my bonus check. But I didn't. I needed more. I needed them to say it. So do you think he is going to meet someone else? I asked, letting my voice crack. Brenda shrugged, a gesture of cruel indifference. Men have needs, Sarah, and successful men have options. If he finds someone in Toronto who aligns better with his future, well, that is just nature taking its course. You should prepare yourself for that possibility. She looked me dead in the eye. Honestly, if he did find someone else, someone who could really push him to the next level, I would not blame him. A mother just wants the best for her son, and sometimes the best isn't the high school sweetheart he married out of obligation. There it was. The admission. They weren't just tolerating me, they were actively rooting for my replacement. They were hoping he would cheat. They were hoping he would leave me so they could install a new shinier wife who they thought would be better for their image. I looked at Chloe. She was nodding in agreement. You should check the prenup, Sarah, Chloe said casually. Oh wait, you guys did not sign one, did you? Because you had nothing when you got married. Well, hopefully if he does leave, he will be generous. But do not expect half. He earned it all. I looked down at my plate, letting a single tear fall. It was a fake tear practiced in the mirror, but it had the desired effect. I just want him to be happy, I whispered. Exactly, Brenda said, finishing her wine. And if you truly love him, you will let him go if he finds happiness elsewhere. Do not be the bitter ex-wife who drags out court proceedings. It is tacky. The dinner continued for another 20 minutes. They listed all of my flaws, my lack of style, my boring job, my inability to give them grandchildren yet. They dissected my life while eating my food and drinking my wine. Finally, Brenda stood up. Well, we should get going. I promised Marcus I would help him with some paperwork tonight. Chloe grabbed the Birkin bag. Thanks for this, Sarah. I will bring it back. Eventually. They walked to the door. I followed them, playing the role of the dutiful hostess, until the very end. Drive safe, I called out as they walked to their car. I watched them pull away. As soon as their taillights disappeared around the corner, I closed the door and locked it. I walked back to the kitchen. I picked up the casserole dish and dumped the entire contents into the trash. Then I pulled my phone from my pocket and stopped the recording. File saved. I pressed play and listened to the last 10 minutes. Brenda's voice was crystal clear. He earned it all. Do not expect half. I would not blame him if he found someone else. I smiled. In the state of Illinois, dissipation of marital assets was a serious offense. But conspiracy to conceal assets and emotional duress, that was just the cherry on top. They thought they were warning me. They thought they were putting me in my place. But all they had done was hand me the ammunition I needed to bury them. Chloe wanted to be part of a power couple. She was about to find out exactly how much power I really had. And Brenda? She wanted a wife who understood the value of $1. I was about to teach her a lesson in economics she would never forget. I poured myself a glass of wine. Real wine this time, a vintage Cabernet from the cellar. I sat down at the island and opened my laptop. It was time to check on Jason. According to the GPS tracker on the rental car I had quietly upgraded for him, using my points, he was currently parked at a very expensive jewelry store on Michigan Avenue. I took a sip of wine. Buy her something nice, Jason, I whispered to the screen. Make sure it is over $5,000. I need the grand larceny charge to stick. The next morning, the silence in the house was heavy. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a storm. I was sitting at the kitchen island analyzing a spreadsheet of Jason's credit card transactions from the last 6 months when a car pulled into the driveway. I didn't need to look out the window to know it wasn't Brenda. Brenda drove like she lived aggressive and loud. This car approached slowly, methodically. I checked the security feed on my phone. It was Marcus. My brother-in-law was the only person in Jason's family I tolerated. He was a corporate lawyer, a man who dealt in facts, contracts, and liability. He was black, self-made, and had married into a family that treated him like a trophy of their own open-mindedness while subtly undermining him at every turn. Chloe, his wife, treated him like an accessory. Brenda treated him like free legal counsel. But Marcus was sharp. He noticed things the others missed. I had been expecting him. I walked to the front door and opened it before he could ring the bell. He stood there in his running gear, looking like he had just finished a 10-mile jog, but he wasn't sweating. He looked cool, composed, and serious. "Morning. Sarah," he said. His voice was deep and guarded. "Morning, Marcus," I replied, stepping back to let him in. "Coffee black, please." He followed me into the kitchen. Unlike Brenda and Chloe, he didn't scan the room for dust or critique my grocery choices. He stood by the counter, his arms crossed, watching me pour the coffee. He didn't sit down. That was a sign. This wasn't a social call. This was a deposition. I handed him the mug. He took it, but didn't drink. "Where is he?" Sarah Marcus asked. I didn't flinch. I took a sip of my own coffee and looked him in the eye. "I don't know what you mean. He is in Toronto. You heard Brenda last night. He is building the future of the family." Marcus set the mug down on the counter. The ceramic clinked against the granite. "Stop it," he said. "I am not Brenda, and I am definitely not Chloe." "I checked the flight logs, Sarah." I raised an eyebrow. "You checked the flight logs? I have a client who owns a logistics firm at O'Hare." Marcus said, his gaze unwavering. I thought it was weird that Jason didn't call me before he left. We usually play a round of golf before he travels. So I called around. There were 3 flights to Toronto yesterday. One was canceled. The other 2 were fully booked weeks ago. Jason wasn't on the passenger manifest for either of them. He paused, letting the evidence hang in the air. "And then there is the car," he continued. "I saw the Tesla in the garage when we pulled in last night. Jason loves that car more than he loves his own mother. If he were driving to Toronto, he would have taken it. If he were flying, he would have parked it at the long-term lot to save on Uber fees because he is cheap. But it is here, which means he didn't leave." I stayed silent. I had underestimated Marcus slightly. I knew he was smart, but I didn't think he would care enough to investigate. So Marcus said, leaning forward, "I will ask you again. Where is he? Did he leave you? Is he in some kind of trouble? Because if he is in legal trouble, I need to know before Brenda mortgages her house to bail him out." I looked at Marcus. I saw genuine concern in his eyes, not for Jason specifically, but for the fallout. He was a man who managed risk for a living, and Jason was a walking liability. I decided to pivot. Lying to a lawyer is foolish. Giving him privileged information, however, creates a bond of confidentiality. I walked over to my laptop bag and pulled out a blue folder. It wasn't thick, but the contents were explosive. I slid it across the island toward him. "You are right, Marcus," I said calmly. "He is not in Toronto." Marcus looked at the folder, then at me. He opened it. The first page was the photo I had taken yesterday of Jason and Vanessa kissing outside the lakeshore. Marcus stared at it. He didn't look shocked. He looked resigned. "I knew it," he muttered. "The intern, the one with the fake laugh." "Keep reading," I said. He flipped the page. It was a bank statement. But it wasn't mine. It was a forensic reconstruction of Jason's hidden debts. Marcus ran his finger down the column of numbers. He stopped at a specific entry dated 18 months ago. His eyes widened. "Wait," Marcus said, his voice hardening. "This says he transferred $15,000 to an offshore gambling site." I nodded. "That is correct." Marcus looked up at me, his face tightening with anger. He told me he needed that $15,000 for a bridge loan. He said the closing costs on the investment property you two were buying had spiked, and he didn't want to stress you out. He swore on his father's grave that he would pay me back in 6 months with interest. I leaned against the counter. "We never bought an investment property, Marcus. There was never a bridge loan. He took your money and lost it on online poker in 3 days. Marcus closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. It was the sound of a man realizing he had been played by the village idiot. "He lied to me," Marcus whispered. "He looked me in the face at my own dinner table and lied to me." "He lies to everyone, Marcus," I said softly. "He lies to me. He lies to his mother. He lies to the IRS. That is what the rest of that file is. Tax evasion, embezzlement from his company's expense accounts. If he goes down, he is going to take anyone close to him down with him." Marcus looked back at the file. He flipped through the pages of evidence I had compiled. He saw the fake receipts. He saw the duplicate invoices. As a lawyer, he understood exactly what he was looking at. He was looking at a felony. "Why are you showing me this?" Marcus asked, closing the folder. "Because you are the only one in this family with a brain," I replied, "and because I know you value your reputation. If Brenda finds out, she will try to cover for him. She will ask you to represent him. She will drag you into this mess." I paused, letting the implication sink in. "I am divorcing him, Marcus. But I am doing it my way. I have already secured my assets. The house is in my name. The savings are gone. He is going to be destitute within a month." Marcus looked at me with a new expression. It wasn't pity anymore. It was respect, and perhaps a little bit of fear. "You planned this," he said. "You let him go to that apartment. You let him think he got away with it. He walked into the trap." I corrected him. "I just closed the door." Marcus tapped his fingers on the blue folder. He looked out the window at his car. He was calculating the odds. He was weighing his loyalty to his wife's brother against his own survival. "If I tell Chloe," he said slowly, "she will tell Brenda. And Brenda will call Jason immediately. He will have time to hide assets or run." "Exactly," I said. "And if he runs, you never get your $15,000 back. But if you let me finish this, if you let the legal process hit him when he is unprepared, the court will force a liquidation of his assets. I can make sure your loan is listed as a priority debt in the divorce settlement. I can help you get your money back, Marcus, but only if you stay out of my way." It was a bribe, a logical legal bribe. I was offering him a chance to recover his loss in exchange for his silence. Marcus looked at the folder again. He thought about the 15 grand. He thought about the disrespect. He thought about Chloe borrowing my bag and mocking me. He stood up. He pushed the folder back to me. "I did not come here today," Marcus said. I smiled. "No, you didn't. You were on a run. You never stopped by." He adjusted his running jacket. "I assume the Toronto story is going to fall apart soon," he asked. "Very soon, I promised." "Good," Marcus said. He walked to the door, then stopped and turned back. "Sarah." "Yes." "When you take him down," he said, his voice devoid of any familial warmth, "make sure he stays down. I do not want him asking me for bail money." "Don't worry, Marcus," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. "Where he is going, money won't help him." He nodded once, opened the door, and jogged back to his car. I watched him drive away. I had neutralized the only threat on the board. Marcus wouldn't talk. His pride was hurt, and his wallet was lighter because of Jason. He would sit back and watch the show just like me. I picked up the blue folder and put it back in my bag. The alliance was formed. It wasn't built on love or trust. It was built on the cold, hard reality that Jason was a liability to everyone who knew him. My phone pinged. It was an alert from the utility company. My request to disconnect the power at the apartment complex had been processed. I looked at the clock. It was 10 a.m. Jason would be trying to make his morning coffee right about now. I wondered how Vanessa liked her espresso. Cold, I imagined, just like her future. After Marcus left, the house fell into a deep, vibrating silence. I sat at the kitchen island staring at the empty space where the blue folder had been. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't get up to reheat it. My mind was drifting back, pulled by the gravity of the $700,000 that was now sitting safely in an offshore trust. To the bank, it was just a number. To Jason, it was a war chest for his new life. But to me, it was the physical weight of my parents' lives. It started 4 years ago. The call came at 2 a.m, a drunk driver on I-90. My parents were gone before the ambulance even arrived. I was 28, an only child, and suddenly untethered from the earth. I remember sitting in the funeral home numb, unable to choose between mahogany or oak for the caskets. Jason stood beside me, holding my hand. At the time, I thought he was my rock. I thought his firm grip was a sign of support. I was wrong. He wasn't holding me up. He was anchoring me down so he could check the Zillow estimate of my childhood home on his phone. I found out later, looking through his browser history, that he had looked up the property value exactly 3 hours after the coroner called. While I was sobbing in the bathroom, he was calculating equity. My parents' house was a modest 2-story in a gentrifying neighborhood. They had bought it in the 80s for nothing, and now it was sitting on a gold mine. They had paid off the mortgage years ago. It was the one place where I felt safe. After the funeral, all I wanted to do was move back into that house, surround myself with their smell, their books, the marks on the doorframe where they measured my height. But Jason had other plans. He started the campaign a week after the funeral. We were sitting in our living room, the one with the furniture he picked out, and he poured me a glass of wine. He always poured wine before he started a negotiation. "Sarah, babe," he said, his voice soft and reasonable. "We need to talk about the house." "I don't want to talk about it," I said, curling into a ball on the sofa. "I'm not ready." "I know," he said, sitting next to me. "But the market doesn't care about our feelings. I've been reading the reports. The housing bubble in that area is about to burst. If we hold on to it, we're going to lose value. Your parents worked too hard for that money for us to just let it evaporate." He used my parents' hard work as a weapon against me. He knew I was terrified of dishonoring their memory. "I just want to keep it, Jason," I whispered. "I want to rent it out. Maybe we can move there one day." He laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Move there, Sarah, come on. It's an old house. The plumbing is shot. The roof needs work. Do you have the time to manage a renovation? Do you have the energy to deal with tenants calling you at midnight because the toilet is clogged? You're already so stressed with your little job, my little job." That was the second prong of his attack. He always framed my career as a hobby, something cute that I did to pass the time while he was the serious breadwinner. He was a sales manager. He moved units. He closed deals. He wore expensive suits and talked about synergy. I was a forensic accountant. He didn't truly understand what that meant. To him, I was a glorified bookkeeper. He thought I spent my days filing tax returns for grandmothers and helping small bakeries balance their ledgers. He thought I was risk-averse, boring, and unimaginative. He had no idea that while he was trying to upsell hospitals on overpriced medical devices, I was dismantling complex money laundering schemes for the state prosecutor's office. He didn't know that my stress wasn't from adding columns in Excel, but from testifying against a CEO who had embezzled $4 million from his employees' pension fund. I never corrected him. In the beginning, it was because I couldn't discuss the details of my cases. Later, it was because I realized he needed to feel superior to function. If he knew I made more money than him in base salary, not including his volatile commissions, his fragile ego would shatter. So I played the role. I let him be the big man. But that night, watching him push me to sell the only piece of my parents I had left, I felt a crack in the facade. "It's not about the work," Jason and I argued. "It's about security. That house is a safety net. Security is for people who are afraid to grow," he countered, his voice getting harder. "This is why you'll never be wealthy, Sarah. You have a scarcity mindset. You want to hoard. I have an abundance mindset. I want to multiply." He stood up and started pacing, using his hands to emphasize his points like he was in a boardroom. "Look, if we sell the house now, we net $700,000 after taxes. We put that into a high-yield portfolio. We let it compound. In 10 years, that's $2 million. That's early retirement. That's freedom. Or we can keep a rotting house that costs us money in property taxes and maintenance. It's a no-brainer, Sarah. Don't let your emotions make you poor. Don't let your emotions make you poor." I was grieving. I was weak. And I trusted him. I thought he was the visionary, and I was just the bean counter. I thought he saw a future I was too afraid to imagine. So I signed the papers. I remember the day we closed the sale. I sat in the title company's office, signing my name over and over again. My hand shook. I felt like I was betraying my father. I felt like I was selling my childhood for a number on a screen. Jason was beaming. He was shaking hands with the real estate agent, joking about golf, looking like he had just won the lottery. When the money hit our account, $700,000, Jason stared at it with a hunger that made my stomach turn. "We should move this to my trading account," he said casually that night at dinner. "I can get us better returns than this savings account. I have a buddy who has an in on a tech IPO." "No," I said. It was the first time I had said no to him in months. He dropped his fork. "Excuse me." "No," I repeated, my voice steady. "That money is not for gambling on tech stocks. It stays in the savings account. It's the safety net. You said it was for our future, for retirement. We aren't touching it." Jason looked at me with cold, dead eyes. The mask slipped for a second. "You are so short-sighted," he sneered. "You're just a worker bee, Sarah. You count the beans, but you have no idea how to grow the stalk. You're going to let inflation eat that money alive because you're too scared to pull the trigger." I didn't back down. "I am the one with the accounting degree, Jason. I know what risk exposure is. The money stays." He relented eventually, but he changed tactics. He started the gaslighting. He would sigh loudly whenever he looked at our bank statements. He would make comments in front of our friends about how conservative I was, with money painting me as a nag who kept him from achieving greatness. If Sarah would let me off the leash, we'd be on a yacht by now, he would joke at parties. Everyone would laugh. I would smile, sipping my water, while analyzing the financial health of his friends based on their leased cars and credit card debt. He thought he had won because the money was in a joint account. He thought it was technically his. He thought that by bullying me, by calling me a bean counter, by making me feel small and unimaginative, he could eventually wear me down and get access to the funds. He didn't know that his insults were actually my armor. Every time he called me a tax lady, he reminded me of my own competence. Every time he mocked my caution, he validated my discipline. I remember one night 6 months ago. He came home drunk from a client dinner, which I now know was a date with Vanessa. He cornered me in the kitchen. "You know what your problem is," he slurred, poking me in the shoulder. "You have no passion. You look at numbers and you see rules. I look at numbers and I see possibilities. That's why I'm the manager and you're just you." I looked at him. I saw the red wine stains on his teeth. I smelled the deceit on his breath. And I realized something profound. He didn't see possibilities. He saw shortcuts. He was right about one thing. I did see rules. I saw the rules of mathematics. I saw the rules of law, and I saw the rules of cause and effect. I knew even then that he was going to try to take that money. I saw the pattern, the secret credit cards, the unexplained withdrawals, the business trips that didn't align with his company's fiscal calendar. My forensic brain, the part of me he despised, had been building a case against him for years without me even admitting it to myself. He thought I was hoarding that $700,000 because I was afraid to spend it. He was wrong. I was hoarding it because I was keeping it safe from him. I looked down at the granite countertop of the kitchen island. This house, this furniture, this life. It was all a facade he had built on credit and lies. But the money was real. It was the sweat and blood of my parents. It was the hours my father worked at the factory. It was the weekends my mother spent clipping coupons. Jason wanted to take that legacy and blow it on a 3-year lease in Toronto with a 23-year-old intern who thought forensic accounting was boring. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "You called me a bean counter, Jason," I whispered to the empty room. "Well, the beans have been counted, and you came up short." The flashback faded. The anger that usually simmered in my gut had cooled into something hard and useful. I wasn't the grieving daughter anymore. I wasn't the submissive wife. I was the auditor, and the audit was finished. I stood up and walked to the sink, rinsing my coffee cup. The water ran cold over my hands. The past was a lesson. The $700,000 wasn't just money. It was a weapon, and I had just fired the first shot. Now it was time to watch the target bleed. I dried my hands and picked up my phone. I had another notification. It was from the electric company servicing the apartment in Toronto, or rather the apartment at the lakeshore. Service disconnection. Notice pending. I smiled. It was time to turn off the lights. 3 days. That is exactly how long it takes for a narcissist to get bored of room service and decide he needs to flaunt his freedom. I was sitting in my home office surrounded by 3 monitors. On the left screen, I had the live tracking data from the rental car I had upgraded for Jason. On the right screen, I had a spreadsheet open where I was categorizing every single expense he had incurred since leaving the house. In the center screen, I had the banking portal for his primary credit card, the Platinum card, the one he loved to slap onto dinner tables, to hear the heavy metal clink against the wood, the one that signaled to everyone in the room that he was a man of status. It was currently 2:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. According to the itinerary Jason had given me, he was supposed to be in an intense strategy meeting at the Toronto headquarters. He had texted me an hour ago complaining about how boring the presentation was and how much he missed my home cooking. I looked at the GPS dot on the left screen. He was not in a boardroom in Canada. He was parked on Michigan Avenue, the magnificent mile of Chicago. And he wasn't moving. I zoomed in. He was parked directly in front of Louis Vuitton. I took a sip of my sparkling water. Of course. Vanessa probably felt entitled to a reward for living in an apartment with no Wi-Fi for 48 hours. She needed something shiny to distract her from the fact that her wealthy boyfriend was currently heating up instant noodles with bottled water because I had cut the gas line to the unit. I opened the credit card administration panel. Status active. Credit limit $50,000. Available credit $48,000. I smiled. I hovered my mouse over the security settings. I did not cancel the card. Canceling it would be too obvious. He would just call the bank and reactivate it. No. I needed to be more creative. I needed to use the system against him. I went to the travel notice section. I entered a new travel plan. Destination Toronto, Canada. Date range today until next month. Then I went to the fraud protection settings. Rule block all transactions originating outside of the travel zone. I hit save. The trap was set. The bank's algorithm now believed that Jason was safely in Canada just like he told everyone he was. Any attempt to use the card in Chicago, his home city, would now be flagged as highly suspicious activity. It was a security feature designed to protect customers. I was just being a very protective wife. I leaned back in my chair and waited. It took exactly 12 minutes. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank app. Transaction alert declined. Merchant Louis Vuitton, Michigan Avenue. Amount $5,650. $5,600. I let out a low whistle. That was not a wallet. That was a capuchin's bag. Vanessa certainly had expensive taste for someone who couldn't afford her own rent. 30 seconds later, my phone rang. The caller ID flashed hubby. I cleared my throat. I took a deep breath to slow my heart rate, not out of nervousness, but to ensure my voice sounded calm and slightly distracted, like a woman who was busy folding laundry. Hello, I answered. Sarah Jason's voice was tight, high-pitched. He was panic whispering. Why is my card not working? I frowned, putting just the right amount of confusion into my tone. What do you mean, honey? Are you okay? You sound like you are out of breath. I am fine, he snapped, then lowered his voice again. I am trying to buy a gift for a client. A thank you gift for the CEO here in Toronto. And the card just got declined. It says fraud alert. Did you touch the account? I paused. I let the silence stretch for 3 seconds. No, I said slowly. I haven't touched anything. But wait. Did you say you are trying to buy something in Toronto? Yes. Obviously, I am in Toronto. That is so strange, I said, my voice rising in alarm. Because I just got an alert on my phone too. But Jason, listen to me. The alert says the transaction is happening in Chicago, on Michigan Avenue. There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear the gears in his head grinding to a halt. What he stammered. Yes, I continued, ramping up the panic. The bank thinks someone is trying to use your card in Chicago. That is why they blocked it. They know you are in Canada. Oh my God, Jason. Do you think someone cloned your card? Do you think they made a fake copy? I don't know, he stuttered. I am logging into the online banking right now, I said, typing loudly on my keyboard to make sure he heard it. Oh, this is bad. It says the attempt was at the Louis Vuitton store in Chicago. Jason, this is serious. Identity theft is a nightmare. I am going to call the police right now. If the person is still in the store, they might be able to catch them. No! He shouted it so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Do not call the police. Sarah, he hissed. Why not? I asked, innocent as a lamb. If someone is stealing your money, we have to stop them. I can call the fraud department and have them completely freeze all our assets until we figure this out. I will do it right now. No, do not freeze anything. Just calm down. He was breathing heavy. I closed my eyes and pictured the scene. He was standing in the middle of a high-end boutique. The sales associate was probably holding the bag behind the counter, looking at him with that polite disdain they reserve for people whose cards decline. Vanessa was likely standing next to him, pouting, tapping her foot, wondering why her sugar daddy was sweating. It must be a glitch. Jason lied. His voice was shaking. Sometimes the GPS on the card reader gets confused. You know technology. It probably just routed through a Chicago server or something. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. That was the stupidest technical explanation I had ever heard. Are you sure? I asked. That sounds risky, Jason. If it is a glitch, why did it decline? It is fine, Sarah. Just do not call the police. Do not call the bank. I will handle it. I have to go. The CEO is waiting. But Jason, if the card is blocked, how will you pay for the gift? I will figure it out. Just stop looking at the alerts. He hung up. I put the phone down on the desk and looked back at the monitors. I knew exactly how he was going to figure it out. Jason had a secret stash. He thought I didn't know about it. For the last 2 years, he had been skimming cash from his commission checks before depositing them into our joint account. He kept the cash in a safe deposit box at a private vault downtown, but he also carried a significant amount in a hidden compartment in his briefcase. He called it his Freedom Fund. I had estimated there was about $10,000 in there. It was his safety net. It was the money he planned to use for incidentals that he didn't want appearing on bank statements. Things like hotel rooms for Vanessa, or dinners or gifts. But $10,000 does not last long when you are trying to maintain a lifestyle you cannot afford. I watched the screen. 5 minutes later, I didn't get a transaction alert. That meant he hadn't used another card. He had paid cash. I did the math. $5,600 plus tax came out to roughly $6,100. He had just blown more than 60% of his emergency cash reserves on a handbag. I leaned back in my chair. This was better than I expected. If he had just walked away, he would have saved the money but lost face with Vanessa. But Jason was a man who lived and died by his ego. He couldn't walk away. He couldn't let the 23-year-old girl think he was broke. So he sacrificed his survival money to preserve his vanity. He was bleeding out, and he had just severed his own tourniquet. I picked up my phone and opened the Photos app. I scrolled to the picture of the Louis Vuitton bag I had seen on their website, the one that cost $5,600. I sent a text to Marcus. Hey Marcus, hope you are having a good day. Just saw a charge attempt on Jason's card for a Louis Vuitton bag. Bank blocked it because of the location mismatch. Funny, right? I guess he is trying to buy client gifts. Hope he has enough cash on hand. I didn't need to say anything else. Marcus would understand. He knew Jason owed him 15 grand. Knowing that Jason was blowing 6 grand on luxury goods while dodging his debt would drive a wedge between them that no amount of brotherly love could fix. I stood up and stretched. The house was quiet. The sun was shining. I decided to go to the kitchen and make myself a sandwich. I used the expensive imported prosciutto Brenda had complained about yesterday. It tasted delicious. While I ate, I thought about Jason's next move. He was running low on cash. His credit cards were useless geofence traps. His apartment had no utilities. He was going to get desperate. And desperate men make mistakes. I checked the time. It was early afternoon. Tonight was the night I had scheduled the internet outage for his cell phone provider. I had called them this morning pretending to be him and requested a SIM card swap to a new device claiming my phone was lost. They were shipping the new SIM to the house tomorrow, which meant that in about 4 hours, Jason's phone was going to stop working completely. No data, No calls, no way to transfer money, no way to call the bank to scream at them. He would be stranded in a luxury apartment in the dark with a girl who expected caviar holding a $6,000 bag she couldn't eat. I took another bite of my sandwich. Welcome to the real world, Jason, I thought. The phone rang again. I looked at it. It wasn't Jason this time. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered it. Hello, Mrs. Reynolds. This is the concierge at the Lakeshore Apartments. My heart skipped a beat. This was unexpected. Yes, this is she. Hi, I am so sorry to bother you. We have a resident here, a Mr. Jason Reynolds in Unit 42B. Yes, that is my husband. Is everything okay? Well, not exactly, the concierge said, sounding uncomfortable. He is currently in the lobby. He is shouting at the maintenance staff. He claims the electricity and water have been cut off in his unit. He is demanding we turn it back on, but our records show the utility account holder requested a disconnection. I smiled. The concierge called me because my name was still on the emergency contact list for the shell company Jason used. He was so sloppy. Oh dear, I said, putting on my best worried voice. That is terrible. But wait, he is supposed to be in Toronto. Why is he at the apartment building? There was a pause. Ma'am, he is definitely here, and he is very upset. He is threatening to sue us, but the utility company says the bill hasn't been paid and the owner canceled the service. I see, I said. Well, if the owner canceled it, there is probably a reason. Maybe he forgot to pay the bill. You know how busy these executives get. I lowered my voice. Listen, if he is causing a scene, you should probably do what you have to do. We don't want him disturbing the other residents, do we? You mean, call security. I mean, if he is being aggressive, I said. I would hate for anyone to get hurt. I understand, Mrs. Reynolds. Thank you. I hung up. I imagined the scene. Jason sweating from the stress of the declined card, clutching his depleting cash, dragging a heavy luxury shopping bag, coming home to a dark, waterless apartment, and now being confronted by security guards in his own lobby. I finished my sandwich. It was time to prepare for the final act. The SIM card swap would happen at 6:00 p.m. That would cut his lifeline. But before that, I had one more email to send. I opened my laptop and composed a message to the compliance officer at Jason's pharmaceutical company. Subject, urgent. Potential FCPA violation and embezzlement. To whom it may concern. I am writing to report serious financial irregularities involving your regional sales manager, Jason Reynolds. Please find attached documentation regarding unauthorized vendor payments and personal use of company funds. I attached the forensic file I had compiled. I hit send. The credit card decline was just a pinch. This was the guillotine. Maslow's hierarchy of needs dictates that physiological requirements must be met before one can achieve self-actualization. Food, water, warmth, and rest are the foundation of human existence. My husband Jason had spent the last 5 years skipping straight to the top of the pyramid, focusing entirely on his ego and his status, assuming that the foundation would always be there to support him. He never realized that I was the one pouring the concrete. I was the one paying the bills, scheduling the maintenance, and ensuring the lights stayed on. He thought electricity was magic. He thought hot water was a guaranteed right. He was about to learn that in the real world, these things are privileges, and privileges can be revoked. I sat in my home office, the glow of my monitors illuminating the dark room. It was 7:00 in the evening. Outside, the Chicago wind was howling, rattling the window panes. It was unseasonably cold for this time of year, dropping to 40 degrees. Inside my house, the thermostat was set to a cozy 72. I had a pot of herbal tea steeping on the desk and a cashmere throw draped over my legs. Across town at the Lakeshore Apartments, the situation was about to become significantly less comfortable. I had accessed the utility portal for Unit 42B an hour ago. Jason, in his infinite wisdom, had registered the utilities under the name of his shell company, J&V Consulting. It was a lazy attempt at anonymity. He used the same email address for the utility account that he used for his fantasy football league. Guessing the password was insultingly easy. It was Vanessa123. I navigated to the Service Management tab. I didn't just turn off the autopay. That would take too long. A missed payment usually results in a grace period of 30 days. I didn't have 30 days. I had 30 minutes. I selected the option for immediate service termination. The reason, tenant vacating premises. I clicked confirm. The request was processed instantly. Smart meters are a marvelous invention. In the old days, a technician had to drive out to the property to manually disconnect the line. Now it was all done remotely. A signal was sent from the power grid to the meter at the lakeshore, and a switch was flipped. I watched the live feed from the camera I had placed in the hallway outside their door. At 7:03 p.m., the light seeping out from under the door of Unit 42B vanished. I leaned forward, sipping my tea. Inside that apartment, the 60-inch television Jason had likely just turned on would have gone black. The hum of the refrigerator would have silenced. The high-speed Wi-Fi router, the lifeline for a 23-year-old influencer wannabe like Vanessa, would have died instantly. I pulled up the audio feed. I had managed to tap into the smart doorbell system before the Wi-Fi cut out, and it had a backup battery that would last for another hour. The audio quality was tinny, but it was enough. Babe Vanessa's voice whined, echoing in the sudden silence. "What happened? Did you pay the bill?" "Of course I paid the bill," Jason snapped. His voice sounded strained. He was already on edge from the credit card incident earlier that afternoon. "It's probably just a building-wide outage. Look outside. Is the hallway dark?" I heard the door open. Light from the hallway flooded into their entryway. "The hallway lights are on." "Jason," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with accusation. "It is just us. Why is it just us?" I closed my eyes and smiled. I could picture Jason standing there in the dark, his heart racing. He knew. Deep down, he had to know. But he couldn't admit it. Admitting it would mean admitting that his financial fortress was made of wet sand. "I will call the front desk," Jason said, slamming the door shut. I waited. I knew exactly how that call would go. The concierge would tell him that the unit's power had been disconnected at the owner's request. Jason would scream. He would threaten to sue. But he wouldn't be able to turn it back on without paying a reconnection fee and a deposit, which would have to be done during business hours. And even if he could, he didn't have a credit card that worked. 10 minutes passed. The temperature in the apartment wouldn't drop immediately, but the psychological chill would set in fast. "This sucks," Vanessa complained. Her voice was getting louder. "My phone is at 12%. I was supposed to go live at 8 to show off the new bag. How am I supposed to ring light without power?" "Use the flashlight on your phone," Jason muttered. "That will drain the battery faster. God, this place is supposed to be luxury. My apartment in Lincoln Park never lost power." "Then go back to Lincoln Park," Jason snapped. There was a silence. A heavy, dangerous silence. "I can't," Vanessa said, her voice icy. "I sublet it yesterday. You told me we were moving to Toronto. You told me everything was taken care of. I am handling it," Jason yelled. "It is just a glitch." "A glitch!" That was his favorite word today. I took another sip of tea. The power outage was just the opening act. The real performance would begin in the morning. The Lakeshore apartments were equipped with tankless electric water heaters. They were efficient and modern, providing endless hot water on demand. But they had one fatal flaw: they required electricity to ignite the heating elements. No power meant no hot water. I went to bed early that night, sleeping soundly in my warm, heated master bedroom. I woke up at 6 the next morning, refreshed and ready for round 2. I checked the trackers. Jason's car was still in the parking garage at the lakeshore. They had stayed the night. It must have been a miserable night. The temperature had dropped to 38 degrees overnight. Without heat, that apartment with its floor-to-ceiling glass windows would be an icebox. At 7 a.m., the audio feed from the doorbell picked up movement. Ah, it was a scream. Unmistakably Vanessa. "Are you kidding me?" she shrieked. "It is freezing, Jason. The water is ice cold." I imagined her standing in the shower expecting a steaming cascade of luxury, only to be hit with water that was barely above freezing temperature. Jason's voice was muffled, probably coming from the bedroom where he was buried under the covers. "The heater is probably electric, Ness. It is out because the power is out." "Well, fix it," she screamed. "I have a brunch with my sorority sisters at noon. I cannot go looking like this." My hair is a disaster. I need to wash it. I need to blow dry it. I can't blow dry it if the outlets don't work. Just wear a hat, Jason suggested. A hat. She sounded like he had just suggested she wear a garbage bag. I am not wearing a hat to the Alice. Do you know who goes there, Jason? I need to shower. I need to charge my phone. I need coffee. There is no coffee because the machine doesn't work. The milk in the fridge is warm. The sushi we bought yesterday smells funny. This is a nightmare. You are overreacting, Jason said, but his voice was weak. He was losing control of the narrative. I am not overreacting. You said you were a regional VP. You said you were rich. Rich people do not live in the dark eating rotten sushi. That was the sting. That was the moment the veneer cracked. Vanessa wasn't in love with Jason. She was in love with the regional VP. She was in love with the access. Take away the amenities, and Jason was just a 34-year-old man with a receding hairline and a mountain of debt. I heard the sound of a suitcase zipper. Where are you going? Jason asked, panic creeping into his voice. I am going to Starbucks to charge my phone, Vanessa said. And then I'm going to the gym to shower. I will come with you, Jason said. No, Vanessa snapped. You stay here and fix this. Do not call me until the lights are on. The door slammed. I checked the camera feed. Vanessa stomped down the hallway, clutching her new Louis Vuitton bag and a tangled mess of charger cables. She looked furious. Jason was alone. I switched back to the GPS tracker. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. He was probably sitting in the dark, shivering, trying to figure out his next move. He couldn't pay the electric bill. He couldn't call me because his phone was about to die and he needed to save the battery. Then the dot moved. He was leaving the building. I watched as his car navigated out of the garage. He wasn't following Vanessa to Starbucks. He was heading west, toward the suburbs. I zoomed out on the map. He was driving toward his mother's house. Of course. When the world beats you down, run home to mommy. I picked up my cell phone and texted Brenda. I needed to prime the pump. Hi, Brenda. Just checking in. I hope you are doing okay. I am just missing Jason so much this morning. I waited. 30 minutes later, the dot stopped at Brenda's driveway. 5 minutes after that, my phone buzzed. It was a call from Brenda. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello? Sarah. Brenda's voice was chirpy, triumphant. You will never guess who just walked through my door. My heart stopped, feigned. Of course. Is it Jason? Is he okay? Did something happen? He is fine. He is fine. Brenda laughed. He is on a layover. Apparently his flight to Montreal, he has a meeting there. Had a connection through O'Hare. He has a 4-hour layover, so he decided to surprise his mother. A layover. The lie was so pathetic it was almost impressive. There were no flights from Toronto to Montreal that connected through Chicago. That was backtracking 500 miles. But Brenda didn't know geography. She only knew adoration. Oh, that is wonderful, I exclaimed. Can I talk to him? Is he there? Can I come over? Brenda lowered her voice. Oh, honey, he is actually in the shower right now. He said the water pressure at the hotel in Toronto was terrible, and he just wanted a good home-style shower. And he is so exhausted. He said he just wants to nap for an hour before he has to head back to the airport. He specifically asked me not to tell you because he didn't want to upset you by seeing you for only 20 minutes. He said it would be too painful to say goodbye again. Too painful, or too risky. He knew that if I saw him, I would smell the fear on him. I would see the dark circles under his eyes, and I would see that he wasn't wearing his business suit. He was likely wearing wrinkled clothes he had pulled out of a suitcase in the dark. I understand, I said, making my voice tremble. He is so thoughtful. He is always protecting me. He really is, Brenda cooed. He looks so handsome, Sarah. Even tired, he looks like a CEO. He is eating a sandwich I made him right now. He was starving. He said the food in Canada is bland. He was starving because he hadn't eaten since lunch yesterday because I cut off his ability to cook. Well, give him my love, I said. Tell him I am thinking about him. I will, Sarah. You just stay strong. He is doing this for all of us. I hung up. I sat there for a moment, processing the level of delusion involved. Jason was currently sitting in his childhood kitchen, eating a turkey sandwich made by his mother after fleeing a cold, dark apartment where his mistress had abandoned him. and he was spinning it as a power move. He was visiting. He was on business. He was a child playing dress-up. But the shower at Brenda's house was only a temporary fix. He couldn't live there. He had to go back to the lakeshore. He had to face Vanessa. I looked at the time. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. Jason had a shower. He had food. He probably felt a little better. He probably thought he could weather the storm. He probably thought he could talk his way out of this with Vanessa, maybe borrow some cash from Brenda before he left. He didn't know that the storm was about to turn into a hurricane. I opened a new tab on my browser. I went to the website for the leasing management company of the lakeshore. I had reported the credit card fraud. I had cut the utilities. Now it was time to address the lease itself. I drafted an email to the property manager. Subject lease termination, Unit 42B. To whom it may concern, I am writing regarding the lease for Unit 42B held under J&V Consulting. Due to unforeseen financial restructuring, the company will be dissolving its assets immediately. We will be vacating the unit within 24 hours. Please consider this our official notice of lease abandonment. We understand this forfeits our security deposit. I didn't send it yet. I saved it in drafts. I wanted him to spend one more night in the cold. I wanted him to try to win Vanessa back tonight, to promise her that he would fix it tomorrow, to beg her to stay. And then tomorrow morning when the eviction notice was posted on his door, I wanted to be watching. But first, I had to deal with the cash. I knew Jason. If he was at Brenda's, he was asking for money. He would tell her he lost his wallet or that the bank froze his accounts by mistake, which was technically true, thanks to me. Brenda didn't have much, but she had a stash of cash in a cookie jar and a rainy day fund in her savings. She would give him whatever she had. I couldn't stop Brenda from giving him money, but I could make sure it wasn't enough. I picked up my phone and called the local towing company that contracted with the lakeshore. "Hi," I said. "I am calling to report a vehicle that is parked illegally in spot 42B. It is a Tesla Model S. The owner has vacated the unit but left the car. It is blocking the maintenance access. Do you have proof of ownership or management authority?" the dispatcher asked. "I will email you the lease termination draft and my ID," I said. "Can you have it impounded today? We can have a truck there in an hour." "Perfect." Jason was at his mom's house getting clean and fed, thinking he had bought himself some time. When he drove back to the city, he would find his apartment dark, his girlfriend furious, and his parking spot empty. To get his car back, he would need to pay the impound fee. That was usually around $300 plus a daily storage rate. If Brenda gave him $500, $300 of it was about to go to a tow truck driver. That would leave him with $200. $200 to support a high-maintenance mistress in a city like Chicago. I took the last sip of my tea. It was still warm. I walked over to the window and looked out at the street. A delivery truck was driving by. It was the SIM card I had ordered. Perfect timing. In a few hours, Jason wouldn't just be cold and broke. He would be silent. I went to the front door to collect the package. I held the small envelope in my hand. Inside was a tiny piece of plastic that held the power to sever Jason's last connection to the civilized world. I went back to my office. I didn't activate it yet. I placed it on the desk next to my keyboard. I wanted to wait until he was driving back from Brenda's. I wanted him to be on the highway, perhaps trying to call Vanessa to apologize, or trying to call the electric company one last time. I wanted the call to drop mid-sentence. I checked the GPS tracker. The dot at Brenda's house was moving. He was backing out of the driveway. He was heading back to the slaughterhouse. I sat down and watched the dot move along I-90. I gave him 10 minutes. Just enough time to get comfortable. Just enough time to think he had survived the morning. I logged into the carrier's website. Activate new SIM. Click. Service on the old SIM deactivated. I watched the dot on the screen. It didn't stop moving, but I knew that inside that car, the music streaming from his phone had just cut out. The navigation map had just frozen. The signal bars had just dropped to 0, no service. He was now driving blind in a car he was about to lose, to a home that wasn't his, to a woman who hated him. "Drive safe, honey," I whispered. There is a saying in the world of forensic accounting that every criminal leaves a fingerprint. It might not be a physical smudge on a glass or a footprint in the mud, but in the digital world, no one is truly a ghost. Money has mass, it has velocity, and most importantly, it has a trail. If you move it, you leave a wake. If you hide it, you leave a void. My husband Jason thought he was a magician. He thought he could make money appear out of thin air to fund his lifestyle and make it disappear before the IRS or his employer noticed. He was about to learn that he was not a magician. He was just a bad accountant. It was late afternoon. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long, sharp shadows across the floor of Jason's home office. I had already dismantled his credit rating. I had cut off his utilities. I had turned his mother against his lies. But those were personal attacks. They were painful, yes, but they were recoverable. A man can rebuild his credit. A man can apologize to his mother. To truly destroy him, to ensure he never climbed out of the hole he had dug, I needed to take away the one thing he built his entire identity around, his career. I sat down at his desk. To my left was my high-powered workstation. To my right, sitting on a pile of old Golf Digest magazines, was his old work laptop. It was a Lenovo ThinkPad issued by his company 3 years ago. When he got upgraded to the newer model last month, he was supposed to return this one to the IT department. He told me he had lost it. He told the company it was stolen out of his car. In reality, he had kept it because he was paranoid. He thought that by keeping the physical hard drive, he was keeping his secrets safe. He didn't realize that keeping the evidence in the house of a forensic auditor was like hiding a murder weapon in the bedroom of a homicide detective. I pulled the laptop toward me. It was dusty. I opened the lid and pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life. It asked for a password. I didn't even have to guess. I typed in the name of his high school football team, followed by his jersey number. Wildcats 88. Access granted. I felt a cold thrill run down my spine. It wasn't joy. It was the satisfaction of a predator who finds the gate to the sheep pen unlocked. I didn't go to his browser history. That was amateur hour. I went straight to the system files. I knew Jason. He was lazy. He treated his work computer like a personal diary. I navigated to the hidden folders in the root directory. Most people name their hidden folders something innocuous like System 32 or Drivers. Jason had named his folder old_docs. I opened it. Inside there were subfolders organized by year. I clicked on the current year. The first thing that caught my eye was a series of PDF invoices. They were labeled Apex Medical Consulting. I opened one. It was an invoice for $10,000 billed to Jason's pharmaceutical company for strategic market analysis. The beneficiary was a company called J&V Consulting. I paused. J&V Consulting. That was the same shell company name he had used to lease the apartment at the lakeshore. J for Jason. V for Vanessa. He was so incredibly arrogant that he put his mistress's initial on his embezzlement vehicle. I cross-referenced the invoice date with his calendar, which I had synced to my phone months ago. On the date of the invoice, Jason wasn't meeting with a consultant. He was at a bachelor party in Miami. I dug deeper. This wasn't just a one-time theft. This was a system. I opened an Excel spreadsheet titled Commission_Track. It looked like a standard sales log, but the columns didn't add up. The margins were too high. I applied a pivot table to sort the data by vendor. There was a recurring payment to a vendor listed as North Star Logistics, $5,000 a month, every month for the last 2 years. I did a quick background check on North Star Logistics using my professional database access. The company was registered to a residential address in Schaumburg, Illinois. I pulled up the property records for that address. It belonged to the vice president of procurement at one of the hospitals Jason sold to. Kickbacks. Jason was overcharging the hospital for drugs, and in return the procurement VP was approving the contracts, and they were splitting the difference through a fake logistics company. This was not just theft. This was a violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. It was wire fraud. It was money laundering. And because the pharmaceutical industry is heavily regulated, it was also a violation of the Stark Law and the anti-kickback statute. I sat back in the chair. The room was silent, but in my head I could hear the sound of prison bars slamming shut. I had him. But I wasn't just going to report him. I was going to construct a case so watertight that no lawyer on earth could bail him out. I inserted a USB drive into the laptop. I started copying everything. The fake invoices, the email chains where he discussed creative billing with the corrupt VP, the bank transfer confirmations that showed money moving from J&V Consulting into his personal offshore gambling accounts. I found a folder titled Vanessa. I hesitated, then opened it. It wasn't photos. It was receipts. He was expensing her lifestyle to the company. Dinner at Nobu expensed as client entertainment. Weekend at the Ritz-Carlton expensed as regional training seminar. The Cartier bracelet she wore in her Instagram profile picture expensed as performance award for top sales rep. He was stealing from his employer to pay for his affair. It was so cliché it was almost insulting. I spent the next 3 hours compiling the data. I didn't just dump the files. I organized them. I wrote an executive summary. I created a flowchart showing the flow of illicit funds. I highlighted the dates, the amounts, and the specific statutes violated. I treated this like a paid assignment. I treated Jason like a hostile target. When the dossier was complete, it was 50 pages long. It was a masterpiece of forensic destruction. I looked at the clock. It was almost midnight. Jason was likely trying to sleep in his cold apartment, or perhaps he was still at his mother's house lying to her about his success. He had no idea that his career had effectively ended 3 hours ago. I opened my web browser. I didn't use my home Wi-Fi. I tethered to a prepaid burner phone I kept for sensitive work. I activated a VPN routing my connection through a server in Switzerland. I navigated to the corporate website of Jason's company. I went to the bottom of the page and clicked on the link for ethics and compliance. I found the email address for the chief compliance officer and the general counsel. I composed a new email. Subject: urgent. Whistleblower report. Systematic embezzlement and FCPA violations. Central Region. To the Office of General Counsel attached is a comprehensive forensic audit regarding the activities of Mr. Jason Reynolds, Regional Sales Manager. The documentation enclosed provides irrefutable evidence of the following: 1. Creation of fraudulent vendor accounts, specifically J&V Consulting used to siphon company funds for personal use. 2. Violation of the anti-kickback statute involving procurement officers at major hospital networks. 3. Falsification of expense reports to cover personal travel and luxury goods for non-employee companions. 4. Misappropriation of over $200,000 in company assets over the last 24 months. I advise you to freeze Mr. Reynolds' access to all company systems and financial accounts immediately to prevent the destruction of evidence. The originals of these documents are stored on a secure drive should law enforcement require them. Sincerely, a concerned stakeholder. I hovered my mouse over the send button. I thought about the way Jason looked at me when he told me not to touch the investment accounts. I thought about the way he laughed at my job. I thought about the way he told his friends I was boring. He called me a bean counter. Well, Jason, I thought, I just counted the beans, and you are missing a lot of them. I clicked send. The screen refreshed. Message sent. I closed the laptop. I pulled out the USB drive. I wiped the keyboard of the Lenovo with a microfiber cloth to remove my fingerprints. Then I shut it down and placed it exactly back where I found it on the stack of golf magazines. I stood up and walked to the window. The wind had died down. The street was quiet. Tomorrow was going to be a very busy day for the Human Resources Department at Jason's company. They would start by auditing his accounts. Then they would call legal. Then they would call the FBI. Jason thought he was going to Toronto to be a king. Instead, he was about to become a liability that the company would cut loose with extreme prejudice. Corporate America does not tolerate thieves, especially thieves who are stupid enough to leave a paper trail. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady. My pulse was slow. I checked the tracking app on my phone one last time before bed. Jason's car was back at the lakeshore. He had returned to the scene of the crime. He was sleeping in a bed he couldn't pay for next to a woman he couldn't afford, working for a company that was about to prosecute him. I took a sip of water. "Sleep tight, Jason," I whispered into the darkness, because when you wake up, the real nightmare begins. Desperation has a distinct scent. In the animal kingdom, predators can smell it on their prey from miles away. In the human world, desperation manifests as a sudden willingness to negotiate a suspension of pride and an eagerness to believe in miracles. My husband Jason was currently drowning in a sea of his own making. He had no cash, no credit, no car, and no mistress, since Vanessa had undoubtedly abandoned him the moment the water went cold. He was desperate, and I was about to dangle a lifeline that was actually a noose. I sat in my living room, the late afternoon sun filtering through the sheer curtains. My laptop was open. I was composing an email. Since I had cut off his phone service, email was the only way he could communicate, provided he could find a free Wi-Fi hotspot. I imagined him sitting in a McDonald's parking lot, leeching off their signal, refreshing his inbox with trembling fingers. Subject: anniversary truce. Jason, I know things have been chaotic with your move. The credit card mix-up and the utility issues must be stressful. I want to fix this. It is our 5th wedding anniversary today. I know you are busy in Toronto, but I want to see you. I want to host a virtual toast with the family tonight at 7:00 p.m. If you join the Zoom call and stay for the whole hour to reassure your mother and me that you are okay, I will authorize a one-time transfer of $50,000 to your personal checking account immediately after the call ends. I found a loophole in the trust fund rules for emergency spousal support. Please, Jason, do this for me. I just want to see your face. Love, Sarah. I hit send. I leaned back and counted. 1, 2, 3. At 12 seconds, my inbox pinged. I will be there. Send the Zoom link. He didn't even wish me a happy anniversary. He didn't ask how I was. He just wanted the money. $50,000 was enough to get his car out of the impound, get a new apartment, and maybe even bribe Vanessa to come back. In his mind, this was his salvation. He probably thought I was breaking. He probably thought his silence had punished me enough and that I was desperate to buy his affection back. He had no idea that I was buying his attendance at his own funeral. I spent the next 2 hours preparing the stage. I wasn't just setting up a laptop, I was setting up a theater. I connected my laptop to the 85-inch 4K television mounted on the living room wall. I set up a webcam on top of the TV, angled perfectly to show the entire living room, the comfortable leather sofas, the expensive art on the walls, and the abundance of food and wine on the coffee table. I wanted him to see the comfort he had lost. I wanted him to see the warmth. At 6:30 p.m., the guests arrived. Brenda walked in first, wearing a dress that was too tight and too sparkly for a casual Wednesday evening. She was clutching a bottle of cheap champagne. "Happy anniversary, Sarah," she shrieked, kissing the air next to my cheek. "I am so glad you decided to do this. Jason needs to feel connected to his family right now. It is so lonely at the top." Chloe followed her, looking bored as usual, scrolling on her phone. She was wearing my Hermes bag. She hadn't returned it yet. I made a mental note to add grand larceny to the police report I would be filing later. And then there was Marcus. He walked in last. He met my eyes. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. He knew something was going to happen tonight, though I hadn't told him the specifics. He took a seat in the corner armchair, the vantage point of a man who wanted to watch the explosion without getting hit by the shrapnel. I poured drinks for everyone. "We are just waiting for Jason to log on," I said, smiling brightly. "He said he had a very important meeting with the board of directors, but he is stepping out early just for us. He is such a hard worker." Brenda sighed, settling onto the sofa. Just like his father, always putting duty first. I checked the time, 6:58 p.m. I initiated the Zoom meeting. I was the host. That meant I controlled the mute button, I controlled the recording, and most importantly, I controlled who could enter and leave the room. I projected the waiting room screen onto the big TV. At 7:01 p.m., a notification popped up. "Jason Reynolds has entered the waiting room. Here he is," I announced. I clicked admit. The screen flickered for a moment, the connection buffering. Then Jason's face filled the 85-inch screen. The first thing I noticed was the lighting. It was harsh, fluorescent, and unflattering. It cast deep shadows under his eyes, which were sunken and rimmed with red. He looked like he hadn't slept in 48 hours. He was wearing a suit jacket and a tie, but the knot was slightly crooked. Behind him was a breathtaking view of the Toronto skyline. The CN tower pierced the blue sky. The office looked sleek, modern, and expensive. But to a trained eye, it was fake. The edges of his hair were shimmering slightly, a digital artifact caused by the virtual background feature struggling to separate him from his real environment. When he moved his hand too fast, it disappeared into the building behind him. "Hi, everyone," Jason said. His voice was too loud, overcompensating. Jason Brenda cried out, waving at the screen. "Look at you. You look so professional." "Is that your office?" Jason forced a smile. It looked painful. "Yes, Mom. This is the executive suite. The view is incredible, isn't it?" "It is stunning," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "But Jason, honey, why is it daylight in your window? It is 8:00 p.m. in Toronto. The sun should have set an hour ago." The room went quiet. Brenda blinked, looking at the screen. Jason froze. I saw his eyes dart to the side. "Oh, this..." He laughed, a nervous hacking sound. "This is a digital wallpaper. We use it for video calls to keep the branding consistent. The real window is over there. It is pitch black outside, obviously. Nice save, I thought. Sloppy but quick." "So how is the job?" Chloe asked, reaching for a cracker. "Are you making tons of money yet?" "We are crushing it," Jason said. He adjusted his collar. "I just closed a massive deal this afternoon. The CEO is actually throwing a dinner for me later, but I told him I had to see my beautiful wife first." He looked at me through the camera lens. His eyes were pleading. He was reminding me of the deal. "I am playing the part. Give me the 50,000. "You are so sweet, Jason," I said. "We miss you so much here." "Don't we, everyone?" "We miss you, son," Brenda said. "When are you coming home for a visit?" "Soon, Mom," Jason said. "As soon as I get settled. It is just expensive here. The cost of living is high." He was laying the groundwork for asking Brenda for money later if my transfer didn't go through. I took a sip of my wine. I zoomed in on the video feed on my laptop screen. I wasn't looking at Jason. I was looking at the reflection in his eyes. And I was looking at the glitches in the background. At one point, he leaned forward to adjust his microphone, and the virtual background slipped. For a split second, the CN tower vanished, and I saw a beige wall with peeling paint and a piece of abstract art that was bolted to the wall. It was a motel room. He wasn't in Toronto. He wasn't even in a hotel. He was in a roadside motel, probably off the interstate, the kind of place that charges by the hour and smells like stale cigarettes and despair. He must have used the last of his cash to rent it for the night, just to have Wi-Fi and a place to put on his suit. I looked at Marcus. He had seen it too. He was looking at his shoes, trying to hide a smirk. "Jason," I said, interrupting Brenda's monologue about her garden. "Before we cut the cake, I just wanted to say how proud I am of you. You really took a leap of faith going to Toronto. Not many men would leave their comfortable home, their car, and their wife to chase a dream. It takes a lot of courage to start over with nothing." It sounded like a compliment, but Jason knew what I was really saying. "You have nothing." "Thanks, babe," he said, sweating. Can we do the toast now? I really have to get back to the board meeting." He was anxious. He wanted the money. He wanted to log off before the lie crumbled. "Of course," I said. I stood up and walked toward the TV. I stood right next to his giant, pixelated face. "Actually, Jason, I have a surprise for you. Since you couldn't be here to open your gifts, I decided to hire a special delivery service to bring your present to you." Jason frowned. "What?" "You sent a package to Toronto." I smiled. "A very special package. It should be knocking on your door, right about now." Jason looked confused. He turned his head, looking away from the camera. In the silence of the room, through the speakers of the TV, we all heard it. Knock, knock, knock. It was a heavy, authoritative sound. It was not the knock of room service. It was the knock of consequences. Jason turned back to the camera, his face pale. "Sarah, who is that? You don't know where I am." "Oh, but I do." "Jason," I whispered, "I know exactly where you are." The knocking came again, louder. "Police. Open up." The color drained from Jason's face so fast, it looked like the video feed had turned black and white. Brenda stood up, dropping her glass. "Sarah, What is happening? I didn't answer her. I just pointed at the screen. Go get your present, Jason, I said. Jason scrambled up from his chair. In his panic, he knocked over the laptop. The camera spun wildly, capturing a blur of the room. The virtual background failed completely. We saw the dirty beige walls. We saw the unmade twin bed with the cheap floral spread. We saw the empty fast food wrappers on the floor. And then we saw Jason opening the door. We didn't see a delivery man. We saw dark uniforms. We saw badges. And then the audio feed cut out as the laptop hit the floor, but the video kept rolling. We watched in high-definition silence as my husband was shoved against the wall of a Motel 6 and handcuffed. I turned to the room. Brenda was gasping for air. Chloe was frozen with a cracker halfway to her mouth. Happy anniversary, everyone, I said, picking up my wine glass. Who wants cake? The room was silent for exactly 3 seconds after the video feed cut out. Then Brenda let out a loud, shrill laugh. She clapped her hands together, the sound echoing off the high ceilings of my living room. "Oh, Sarah, you really had me there for a minute," she exclaimed, wiping a tear of laughter from her eye. That was brilliant. Simply brilliant. You hired actors to play a prank on him. I mean, it is a little dark, but Jason has always loved those crime dramas. The production value was incredible. Did you see the look on his face? He looked terrified. She turned to Chloe and Marcus, raising her champagne glass high. To Sarah, Brenda announced, beaming at me, the queen of surprises. I honestly thought for a second that my son was being arrested in a motel room. Can you imagine a motel room? As if Jason would ever set foot in a place like that. He has a suite at the Four Seasons in Toronto. Chloe let out a nervous giggle, lifting her glass. Yeah, that was really intense. You got us, Sarah. When do the actors break character? Is he going to call us back now and laugh about it? I stood by the television, my hand resting gently on the HDMI cable. I looked at them. They were desperate for it to be a joke. Their brains were performing mental gymnastics worthy of an Olympic gold medal to reject the reality they had just witnessed. They needed the comfortable lie. They needed Jason to be the successful executive, the golden boy, the provider. They couldn't accept that he was a criminal in a cheap suit, getting cuffed against a water-stained wall. I picked up my own glass of wine. It was a vintage Bordeaux, deep red and complex. I swirled it gently. I am glad you enjoyed the opening act, Brenda. I said, my voice calm and measured. But that wasn't a prank. And those weren't actors. That was the Chicago Police Department enforcing a federal warrant. Brenda's smile faltered, but she didn't drop it completely. She waved her hand dismissively. Stop it. You are taking the joke too far. It is not funny anymore. Call him back. Tell him we want to say happy anniversary properly. I cannot call him back, Brenda, I said. They confiscated his phone. But you are right about one thing. We should celebrate properly. It is my 5th wedding anniversary after all. And I prepared a very special presentation to honor the last 5 years of my life. I walked over to my laptop. Sit down, everyone, I commanded softly. The show isn't over. Brenda hesitated, then sat back down on the sofa, clutching her pearls. She looked at Marcus. Marcus wasn't laughing. He was staring at me with a look of terrified respect. He knew, but he stayed silent, sinking deeper into the armchair. I pressed a key on the laptop. The 85-inch screen flickered to life again. A new slide appeared. It was titled, Our Journey. Usually at an anniversary party, this is the moment where the room fills with oohs and ahs. You expect to see photos of the wedding day, the honeymoon in Maui, the weekends at the lake house. You expect soft piano music and sepia filters. I gave them the silence of a tomb. The first photo faded onto the screen. It was high resolution, taken with a telephoto lens from across the street. It was Jason. He was standing on the balcony of the Lakeshore apartment complex. He wasn't wearing his wedding ring. He was wearing a silk robe. And he wasn't alone. Vanessa was standing behind him, her arms wrapped around his waist, her head resting on his shoulder. They were laughing. The sunlight hit her face, perfectly illuminating the diamond earrings she was wearing. Brenda squinted at the screen. Who? Who is that? Is that a cousin? Why is she hugging him like that? I clicked to the next slide. This one was more intimate. It was taken through the window of a restaurant downtown. Jason and Vanessa were seated at a candlelight dinner. Jason was holding her hand across the table, kissing her knuckles. "This was taken 3 days ago," I narrated, my voice devoid of emotion. "This was the night he told you he was in an emergency strategy meeting in Toronto. The restaurant is RPM Italian. The bill was $400. Brenda stood up. "That is fake," she screamed. Her face turned a blotchy shade of purple. "You photoshopped that. You made that on your computer. My Jason would never do that. He loves you." I clicked again. This wasn't a photo. It was a screenshot of a text message thread. I had downloaded it from his cloud backup before I locked him out. "Jason, just hold on a little longer, babe. Once I get the bonus, I am dumping the bean counter. She is so boring, I want to scream. We will take her money and live like kings in Canada." "Vanessa, you better. I am tired of waiting. Make sure you get the house, too." The text on the giant screen was large enough for a blind man to read. Chloe gasped. She covered her mouth with her hand. The bean counter. That was the insult Jason used when he thought I wasn't listening. "That is not real," Brenda yelled, pointing a shaking finger at the TV. "Anyone can type words on a screen. You are framing him. You are jealous because he is successful, and you are just a nobody." I clicked to the next slide. The investment. This slide was a spreadsheet. But not just any spreadsheet. It was a forensic reconstruction of our household finances over the last 24 months. I had color-coded the columns, green for legitimate expenses, red for fraud. The screen was bleeding red. "Here we have the tuition payments for Vanessa's graduate school," I explained, using a laser pointer I had pulled from my pocket to circle the line item. $12,000, paid from the Emergency Home Repair Fund. "Brenda, do you remember when Jason told us the roof was leaking and he needed cash to fix it?" Brenda went silent. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. And here I continued, moving the dot down the screen. "We have the lease agreement for the apartment at the lakeshore, $5,000 a month, plus a security deposit, paid for by a shell company he set up using your maiden name, Brenda. Did you know you are listed as the silent partner of J&V Consulting?" Brenda's eyes widened. "What, I never signed anything. You didn't have to," I said. "He forged your signature. That makes you an accessory to fraud, unless of course you claim ignorance. But given how loudly you are defending him right now, the police might have questions about your involvement." Marcus sat up straight. He looked at Brenda. "Mom, shut up. Do not say another word." "But it is a lie," Brenda shrieked. "It is all a lie. Sarah is crazy. She is having a psychotic break." I clicked to the final slide. The future. This was a single document. It was scanned in high definition. It was a petition for dissolution of marriage. The timestamp showed it had been filed electronically 3 days ago. But it wasn't just a standard divorce petition. It was a filing based on fault, adultery, abandonment, financial malfeasance. And at the bottom of the document, there was a signature. It was mine. Sharp, clear, and final. "And here is the best part," I said, turning to face them. "In the state of Illinois, when one spouse uses marital assets to fund an extramarital affair, it is called dissipation. The court requires the cheating spouse to pay back every single penny to the innocent spouse before the remaining assets are divided." I walked over to the TV and tapped the screen where the total amount of red expenses was listed. Jason has spent $140,000 on Vanessa in the last 2 years. That money comes out of his share of the assets. But here is the kicker. He doesn't have a share anymore, because I already liquidated the savings and moved them into a protected trust to cover the debt he owes me. I looked at Chloe. "And Chloe, that Hermes bag you are holding." Chloe clutched the bag tighter to her chest, looking terrified. "Jason bought that for Vanessa 2 months ago. She returned it because she wanted the cash instead. He kept the receipt. He put it in my closet to hide it from her so she wouldn't know he returned it. So technically you are holding stolen property that was purchased with embezzled funds." Chloe dropped the bag. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. She scrambled back on the sofa as if the bag were a venomous snake. Brenda was shaking. She was no longer screaming. She was hyperventilating. She looked from the screen to me, then to Marcus. "Marcus, do something," she pleaded. "She is ruining him. She is making this all up. Tell her she can't do this." Marcus stood up slowly. He adjusted his suit jacket. He looked at the screen, staring at the bank statements. He looked at the forged signature under Brenda's name. He looked at me. "He did it, Mom?" Marcus said. His voice was quiet, resigned. Brenda grabbed his arm. "What are you saying? You are supposed to be his brother. I am a lawyer," Mom Marcus snapped, pulling his arm away. "And I know a forensic audit when I see one." "Sarah didn't make this up. These are bank records. These are timestamps. He forged your signature. He stole from the family." He turned to me. Sarah Marcus said, "The police? Are they coming here?" "No," I said. "They have everything they need at the hotel and at his office. I sent a copy of this presentation to his company's compliance department this morning." Brenda let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. "You got him fired. You destroyed his career. How are we going to live? He pays for my car. He pays for your father's medical bills." I poured myself more wine. "Correction, Brenda. I paid for your car. I paid for the medical bills. Jason used the money I deposited into the joint account to pay you while he spent his own salary on his girlfriend. You have been living off my charity for 5 years. I took a sip. "And the charity is officially closed." Brenda collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. She was sobbing now, deep, ugly sobs of a woman realizing her golden calf had been melted down for scrap metal. The room felt heavy, suffocating with the weight of the truth. The celebration was over. The cake sat uncut on the table. The champagne was going flat. I looked at the slide on the screen one last time. The divorce papers. The end of an era. I felt lighter than I had in years. I picked up the remote and turned off the TV. The screen went black, plunging the room back into the dim evening light. "Get out," I said softly. Brenda looked up, her mascara running down her face. "What?" I said. "Get out of my house. Take your tuna casserole. Take the stolen bag and leave. I have a lot of paperwork to do tomorrow. I need to change the locks." Chloe stood up first. She grabbed her purse, leaving the Hermes bag on the floor. She didn't look at me. She just walked to the door, her head down. Marcus helped Brenda up. She was trembling, leaning heavily on him. She looked at me one last time, her eyes filled with hatred. "You are a monster, Sarah," she hissed. "He loved you." I smiled, a cold, genuine smile. "No, Brenda. He loved my wallet. And now that he doesn't have access to it, I suspect you will find out exactly how much he loves you when he calls you for bail money." I walked to the door and held it open for them. Marcus stopped as he passed me. "I will handle the bail hearing," he muttered, "but I am not representing him in the divorce." "Smart choice, Marcus," I said. They walked out into the night. I watched them get into their cars. I watched them drive away, leaving my driveway empty and silent. I closed the door and locked it. I engaged the deadbolt. I turned on the alarm system. I walked back into the living room. The Hermes bag was still on the floor. I picked it up. It was a beautiful bag. I decided I would sell it and donate the money to a shelter for battered women. I sat down on the sofa alone in my big, quiet house. I picked up the fork and took a bite of the cake. It was vanilla. Sweet, rich. It tasted like victory. The knocking on the door of the motel room was not a polite request for entry. It was a demand. It was a heavy rhythmic thudding that seemed to shake the cheap camera lens on Jason's laptop. Through the 85-inch screen in my living room, the sound was amplified by my surround sound system. I could feel the bass of each knock vibrating in the floorboards beneath my feet. Jason froze. His face, which had been pale a moment ago, turned a sickly shade of gray. He looked at the door, then back at the camera, then back at the door. The digital facade of the Toronto skyline behind him had completely vanished, leaving him exposed against the peeling beige wallpaper and the water-stained ceiling tiles. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice trembling so hard the microphone barely picked it up. "Sarah, is this part of the surprise? Is this the delivery service?" I sat perfectly still on my sofa, my wine glass resting on my knee. I did not answer him. I simply watched. This was the moment I had been curating for 72 hours. "Open the door." A voice boomed from the television speakers. It was deep, authoritative, and left no room for negotiation. "Federal agents." "We have a warrant." Jason scrambled backward, knocking over the cheap particle board chair he had been sitting on. He looked at the laptop screen, his eyes wide with a primal terror. "Federal agents," he squeaked. "Sarah, why are federal agents here? I haven't done anything federal. I just borrowed some money from the company. That is a civil matter. That is an HR issue." He was so naive. He still thought he was playing in the minor leagues. He thought he was just a guy who padded his expense report. He didn't realize that when you accept kickbacks from medical suppliers across state lines and launder that money through a shell company to pay for online gambling hosted in the Caribbean, you have effectively invited the FBI to your birthday party. "Open the door, or we will breach," the voice shouted. Jason stumbled toward the door. He was wearing his expensive Italian suit jacket, but below the frame of the camera, I caught a glimpse of his legs. He was wearing his boxer shorts. He hadn't even bothered to put on pants for the Zoom call. The absurdity of it, a man in a $2,000 jacket and underwear about to be arrested for white-collar crime in a $60 a night motel, was almost poetic. He unlocked the deadbolt. His hands were shaking so badly, he dropped the chain lock twice before managing to slide it free. He opened the door slowly. The camera angle was perfect. Because the laptop had fallen to the floor earlier, it was angled upward, giving me a cinematic view of the entryway. The door swung open, and the room was instantly flooded with people. They didn't look like the friendly neighborhood beat cops. These were men and women in windbreakers with yellow bold lettering on the back. FBI, IRS, Criminal Investigation. Jason put his hands up immediately. Wait. There is a mistake. My name is Jason Reynolds. I am a regional vice president. I am currently in a board meeting." A tall agent with a buzz cut stepped forward. He didn't look impressed by Jason's title. He held up a piece of paper. "Jason Reynolds, we have a federal warrant for your arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to violate the anti-kickback statute, and tax evasion. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." "Tax evasion," Jason stammered. "I pay my taxes. My wife is an accountant. She handles all of that." I took a slow sip of my wine. There it was, the attempt to throw me under the bus. He was already trying to frame me even as the handcuffs were coming out. The agent grabbed Jason's wrist and spun him around. "We know your wife is an accountant, Mr. Reynolds," the agent said, his voice crystal clear through my center channel speaker. "She is the one who sent us the forensic audit of your shell company J&V Consulting." Jason froze. He stopped struggling. He turned his head, straining his neck to look back at the laptop lying on the floor. He looked right into the camera lens. "Sarah," he gasped. I leaned forward, looking directly into my webcam. I knew my face was being projected onto the screen of his laptop on the motel floor. "Hello, Jason," I said softly. You did this?" he asked, his voice breaking. "You called them." "I didn't just call them, Jason. I did their homework for them." The agent pulled Jason's arms behind his back. The sound that followed was the most satisfying sound I have ever heard in my life. It was better than the sound of a champagne cork popping. It was better than the sound of ocean waves. Click, click. The ratcheting sound of the stainless steel handcuffs locking into place echoed through my living room. It was crisp. It was metallic. It was final. Jason winced as the metal bit into his wrists. "Sarah," he screamed, struggling against the agent's grip. "Sarah, tell them to stop. You can fix this. We have money. Use the savings." The agent began to recite his Miranda rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Jason ignored him. He was shouting over the agent's voice, directing his desperate pleas at the laptop screen. "Sarah, the $700,000. The trust fund. Use it to get me a lawyer. Get me the best lawyer in Chicago. Call Robert Shapiro. Call anyone. We can fight this. I will pay you back. I promise I will pay you back." He was begging for the very money he had tried to steal. He was begging for the safety net he had mocked me for building. The agent began to drag him toward the door. Jason dug his bare heels into the dirty carpet of the motel room. "Please, Sarah, don't let them take me. I can't go to prison. I am not built for prison. I have a bad back." "Sarah, I watched him struggle. I watched the man who had gaslit me for 5 years, the man who had called me boring, the man who had spent my parents' inheritance on a mistress, reduce himself to a weeping child. I reached for the remote control to unmute my microphone, fully ensuring there was absolutely no static on the line. I wanted him to hear this. I wanted this to be the last thing he heard before he went into the system. "Jason," I said, my voice cutting through his panic. He stopped struggling for a split second. He looked at the screen, hope flickering in his eyes. He thought I was breaking. He thought I was going to save him. "Yes, Sarah. Help me." I looked deep into the camera lens, swirling the dark red liquid in my glass. "Do not worry, honey," I said, my tone incredibly calm, almost sweet, regarding the lawyer. "I have already taken care of it." Jason let out a sob of relief. "Oh, thank God. Thank God, Sarah. Who did you hire? Is it a top firm?" I took a slow, deliberate sip of wine, letting the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. "I used the $700,000 to hire the best divorce attorney in the state, Jason." His face fell. The hope vanished, replaced by a look of absolute crushing despair, and I added, smiling over the rim of my glass, "I also hired a forensic defense team. But not for you. For me. To ensure that when the IRS comes looking for the missing tax payments on your illegal income, they know exactly whose signature is on the fraudulent returns. It isn't mine." Jason's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "And Jason, one more thing." The agent gave him a shove, forcing him through the doorway. "That suit jacket you are wearing," I said, "it is dry clean only. Try not to ruin it in the holding cell. I plan to sell it on eBay to pay for my new patio." "Sarah, no, you be." The agent slammed the motel door shut. The video feed didn't cut immediately. For a few seconds, I was staring at the empty motel room. I saw the unmade bed. I saw the empty fast food wrappers. I saw the peeling paint. And then a second agent walked into the frame. He looked down at the laptop. He leaned over and picked it up. His face filled the screen. He looked like he had seen everything. He adjusted his earpiece. "Mrs. Reynolds," he asked. "Yes, officer," I replied. "This is Special Agent Miller. We have the suspect in custody. We will be seizing this device as evidence. We will need you to come down to the field office tomorrow to sign a formal statement regarding the documents you sent over." "I will be there at 9 sharp, Agent Miller," I said. He nodded, a look of professional appreciation on his face. "Good work, ma'am. The file you sent was extensive. You made our job very easy. I'm a forensic accountant, agent," I said. "I count beans. And sometimes I count years in prison sentences." He smirked. "Have a good night, Mrs. Reynolds." "You too, agent." The screen went black. The connection was terminated. I sat there in the silence of my living room. The adrenaline that had been coursing through my veins began to settle into a warm, humming sense of peace. I looked at the blank TV screen. The reflection of my living room stared back at me. It was clean. It was quiet. It was mine. The police were gone. The family was gone. Jason was gone. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the streetlights were flickering on. Life in the suburbs was going on as usual. Neighbors were walking their dogs. Cars were pulling into driveways. No one knew that inside my house, a regime had just fallen. I thought about the $700,000. It was safe. It was sitting in a trust that Jason couldn't touch, accruing interest, protected by layers of legal armor that I had constructed. I thought about the divorce. It would be messy, of course. Jason would try to fight, but he had no money to fight with. He would be assigned a public defender for his criminal case, and that public defender would be too busy trying to keep him out of federal prison to worry about his divorce settlement. I had won. But I wasn't just happy about winning. I was happy about the silence. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't have to listen to Jason's voice telling me what I was doing wrong. I didn't have to listen to his mother criticizing my cooking. I didn't have to listen to his lies. I walked to the kitchen and placed my wine glass in the dishwasher. Then I went to the pantry. I pulled out a bag of premium coffee beans. Jason had always insisted we buy the cheap stuff because coffee is coffee. I opened the bag and inhaled the aroma. It smelled rich and complex. I set the timer on the coffee maker for 6 o'clock a.m. Tomorrow was going to be a great day. I had a meeting with the FBI, a meeting with my divorce lawyer, and then I was going to go shopping. I needed a new handbag, and unlike Chloe, I was going to pay for mine with my own money. I turned off the lights and walked up the stairs to my master bedroom. I climbed into the middle of the king-sized bed, spreading my arms out wide, claiming the entire space. I fell asleep instantly. And for the first time in a decade, I didn't dream of numbers. I dreamed of absolutely nothing. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but when they finally crush you, they grind you into dust. It took 6 months for the dust to settle on the wreckage of the life Jason Reynolds thought he was building. I did not miss a single court date. I sat in the back row of the federal courthouse in downtown Chicago, wearing my best tailored suits, watching the man who once called me boring beg for mercy from a judge who had no patience for white-collar criminals. Jason pleaded guilty. He had no choice. The forensic file I sent to his company and the FBI was so comprehensive that his public defender told him going to trial would be suicide. He was facing 20 years. By pleading out, he got 3 years in a minimum security federal prison camp for wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to violate the anti-kickback statute. I remember the day of the sentencing. Jason stood before the bench. He had lost 20 pounds. His expensive haircut had grown out into a shaggy, unkempt mess. He wasn't wearing an Italian suit. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit issued by the Cook County Department of Corrections. He tried to look at me as the bailiff led him away. He tried to mouth the word, sorry. I didn't look back. I was too busy checking the time on my phone to see if I could make my lunch reservation. The financial fallout was even more catastrophic than the prison sentence. Because Jason had used company funds to pay for personal expenses, the pharmaceutical company sued him for restitution. They wanted every single penny back. But Jason had no money. He had spent it all on leased cars, luxury apartments, and Vanessa. This is where my forensic accounting skills truly paid off. In the divorce settlement, which ran parallel to the criminal case, I presented a masterclass in asset tracing. I proved to the court that the $700,000 in the trust fund originated from my parents' inheritance. Under Illinois law, inheritance is considered separate property unless it is hopelessly commingled. Jason's lawyer tried to argue that because I had put it in a joint account, it was marital property, but I countered with the doctrine of dissipation. I showed the judge the spreadsheets. I showed him the $140,000 Jason had wasted on his mistress. I showed him the gambling losses. The judge ruled that Jason's financial misconduct amounted to a theft of marital assets, to satisfy the debt he owed me for the dissipation, and to pay the restitution he owed his company. The court awarded me 100% of the remaining assets. I walked away with the house. I walked away with the $700,000. I walked away with his 401k, which I liquidated to pay for my legal fees. Jason walked away with a prison ID number and a restitution order that will garnish his wages for the rest of his life. The collateral damage was just as severe. Brenda, the woman who had enabled his narcissism for 34 years, learned a harsh lesson in liability. She had co-signed for Jason's student loans years ago, loans he had stopped paying to fund his lifestyle. When he went to prison, the default notices started arriving at her door. Furthermore, because she was listed as a silent partner in the shell company J&V Consulting, the IRS audited her. They found that she had accepted cash gifts from Jason that were technically proceeds of crime. She was hit with a massive tax bill and penalties. She had to sell her house, the house where Jason grew up, the house where she had looked down her nose at me for 5 years. The market was down, and she had to sell it quickly to pay the government. She moved into a state-subsidized assisted living facility on the south side of the city. I heard from Marcus that it smells like bleach and boiled cabbage, and she has to share a room with a woman who screams in her sleep. She calls Marcus every week crying about how unfair it is. Marcus stopped answering her calls after the 2nd month. And then there was Vanessa, the influencer, the muse. The moment the FBI raided the motel room, she vanished. She deleted her Instagram. She deleted her TikTok. She thought she could just ghost the situation like a bad date. But you cannot ghost the federal government. The FBI traced the luxury goods Jason had bought her, the Louis Vuitton bags, the jewelry, the electronics. They were purchased with stolen funds. That made them stolen property. When investigators found her staying at a friend's apartment in Miami, they charged her with receiving stolen goods and conspiracy. She turned on Jason instantly. She gave a deposition detailing every expensive dinner, every trip, every gift, claiming she had no idea the money was illegal. It didn't save her. She was indicted. She is currently awaiting trial, and her face is all over the internet, not as a beauty guru, but as the mugshot of a gold digger who flew too close to the sun. As for me, I sold the house in the suburbs. I couldn't live there anymore. The walls held too many memories of a man who never really existed. I sold the furniture. I sold the wedding china. I even sold the diamond ring he gave me, which I discovered was a lab-grown diamond he had passed off as natural. I added the proceeds to the trust fund. I stood in the empty foyer of that house one last time before handing the keys to the new owners. I thought I would feel sad. I thought I would mourn the lost years. But all I felt was the cool, refreshing breeze of a ledger that had finally been balanced. I had audited my life, identified the fraud, and liquidated the toxic assets. I walked out the front door and never looked back. 1 year later. The air in Paris tastes different than the air in Chicago. It tastes like butter exhaust and expensive perfume. I sat at a small round table outside a cafe in the 6th arrondissement, watching the people walk by. It was a crisp Tuesday morning in October. I was wearing a trench coat that cost more than Jason's car. I wasn't just Sarah the accountant anymore. I was Sarah Miller, senior partner at Deloitte, France. After the scandal with Jason, my reputation in the industry skyrocketed. The story of how I had dismantled a complex embezzlement scheme from my living room spread quietly through the tight-knit world of forensic auditing. I was headhunted. A global firm needed someone with a sharp eye and a ruthless dedication to the truth to head their European fraud division. They offered me a relocation package, a salary that made my old one look like pocket change, and a corner office overlooking the Seine. I took the job, I took the money, and I took my life back. My phone buzzed on the table. It was an email from my assistant. Ms. Miller, the files for the Roche investigation are ready for your review. I smiled. I loved my job. I loved the hunt. I loved finding the hidden patterns in the chaos. The waiter approached my table, placing a fresh espresso and a croissant in front of me. He also placed a small envelope on the table. "This came in the mail for you, madame," he said. "It was forwarded from your old address in the States." I looked at the envelope. It was plain white. The handwriting was messy, scrawled in pencil. The return address was a P.O. box in Terre Haute, Indiana. The Federal Correctional Complex. It was from Jason. I stared at it for a long moment. I hadn't heard from him in a year. Marcus told me he was having a hard time inside. The other inmates didn't respect a white-collar guy who got taken down by his wife. He was working in the prison laundry for 12 cents an hour. I picked up the envelope. It felt light, flimsy. I could imagine what was inside. A plea for forgiveness, a story about how he had found God, or maybe a request for money for the commissary so he could buy instant noodles. He probably wanted to tell me that he missed me, that he realized too late that I was the best thing that ever happened to him. He probably wanted closure, but closure is a myth. Closure is something people seek when they are afraid to move on. I wasn't afraid. I had moved on the day I transferred that money. I didn't open the envelope. I didn't want to read his lies. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of occupying even 5 minutes of my brain space. His words had no value. His currency was void. I signaled the waiter. "Do you have a light?" I asked in fluent French. The waiter nodded and pulled a silver lighter from his apron. He flicked it open, offering me the flame. I held the corner of the envelope to the fire. The paper caught instantly. The orange flame curled around the edges, turning the white paper into black ash. I watched the return address disappear. I watched Jason's name turn into smoke. I held it until the heat kissed my fingertips, then I dropped the burning paper into the heavy glass ashtray on the table. I watched it burn until it was nothing but a pile of gray dust. The waiter looked at me, raising an eyebrow. "Bad news, madame?" he asked. "No," I replied, picking up my espresso. "Just old receipts." I drank the coffee in one smooth sip. It was bitter strong and perfect. I stood up, adjusting my coat. I grabbed my bag of vintage Chanel I had bought for myself to celebrate my promotion. I had a meeting in 20 minutes. I was going to walk into a boardroom full of powerful men and tell them exactly where their money was going. I walked down the cobblestone street, my heels clicking a rhythm of independence. Jason had called me a bean counter. He meant it as an insult. He thought that managing money was small work. He thought that power came from spending, from flash, from noise. He was wrong. Power comes from knowing the truth. Power comes from control. Power comes from the ability to look at a column of numbers and see the story they are trying to hide. I am a bean counter, and I count every single one. I paused at the corner, looking at the Eiffel Tower rising in the distance. I took a deep breath. For anyone out there who has ever been underestimated, for anyone who has been told they are too boring, too cautious, too practical, for anyone who has been made to feel small by someone who is simply loud, remember this: the person who holds the pen writes the history, and the person who holds the ledger decides the future. Never let them see your cards until the game is already over. If this story of financial justice gave you a sense of satisfaction, if watching a narcissist lose everything to the woman he underestimated made you smile, then please hit that like button. My favorite part was watching the fire consume his last attempt to manipulate me. What was yours? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories about women who take back their power, subscribe to the channel, because the best revenge isn't just living well, it's living free.